Everybody, so we're going to start the meeting. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, March 8th, 2021. Thank you. Flag.
Allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Priest, I believe you have something for us to read tonight?
Yes, sir, I do. And apologies for any children in the background. They're reformed this evening. So here we go. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this public hearing of the Town of Burlington Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can listen and/or view this meeting while in progress is broadcast on BCAT Government Cable Access Television, BCAT Government Coverage Facebook Live page, or by using the link provided in the agenda for our WebEx Cisco online meeting, or via phone at 408-418-9388, meeting number 179-541-1284. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by commenting on the BCAT Government Coverage Facebook Live page, the chat function on the WebEx virtual meeting, or via telephone at 781-270-1635. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we get going tonight, some of you may know or may not know Paul's on vacation. So Mr. John Denizio, our Assistant Town Administrator, will be handling his role tonight. So if there are any mistakes, it's definitely not my fault. We can just go with John on that. So Mr. Denizio, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, I just want to update a small adjustment to the agenda. Item number 43, the cemetery rules and regulations, is going to be postponed, pushed off to another meeting due to the high volume of questions and comments received by the department. The staff needs more time to get those in order. So we won't be doing that tonight. I only say it now in case there was anybody that was waiting around for it. I didn't want them to have to wait. So I think we're ready to start, Mr. Chairman. Shall I introduce
Absolutely.
the first item?
Start up with the first item, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Item 34 is the Burlington Scholarship Committee, here to give us an update. At our last meeting, we read an announcement that they were going to be giving away 3 scholarships for $2,500. And I think we have someone here tonight to just give us an update on maybe how students can apply and how that residents or anybody in general could support the program. So I'm not sure who's here to talk, but
Who would be speaking on that?
Hi, my name is Sheila Fitzpatrick. I'm the chairperson for this year.
Hi, Sheila.
Gina Leary is the co-chair, and Bill Boyven is the secretary, and we're all present today.
Great, fantastic. Well, you have the floor.
So we, the committee is made up of 5 of us from Burlington: Jen Kosis, Kent Moffitt, Bill, Gina, and myself, and Rosalind Manazian. And we have been doing this. This is our third year of doing it. Any student in the town of Burlington, regardless of which high school they go to, can apply for the scholarship. There's an application. They can get it from their high school guidance counselor. We reach out to each of the high schools, the Burlington High School, Shawsheen Tech, Boston Prep, St. John's, many of the high schools, and provide them with a copy of the scholarship and the requirements. Everything gets turned into Mr. Adevato at Burlington High School. He and his staff redact all of the personal information and number the applications, and then they turn everything over to us. We have a scoring rubric. We go through. Every student gets scored, 2 times at first, and then we usually pick the top percent, usually 10%, and then everybody scores them, and that's usually how we have been selecting the recipients for the last 2 years, and we'll be doing the same thing this year. anybody in the town of Burlington, if they're paying their dog license, their real estate taxes, or their excise tax, can, there's a form right on their bill, but when they pay it, there's also a pop-up, so they can donate anytime they want to. So that's how we've been generating funds for this scholarship.
Thank you. Would William or Gina like to speak on this?
Yeah, this is Bill. I would like to just say that we have had a remarkable amount of applications. Last year, we had 75 applications. Sheila had done a good job identifying all the schools that Burlington seniors are attending or have attended, and so we notified 25 different schools of the existence of the application. And we got 75 applications from 5 different schools. So I think that was pretty good. And we're trying to get, a little more advertising for outreach for applications and also more exposure for potential donations. And each year we've had between, $7,500 and $10,000 to award so far. One thing I would like to point out, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, is that the way this committee was set up 3 years ago, all 5 of the appointed volunteers have the same tenure. So we're all going to expire at the same time in 2022. I would suggest the next time that we repopulate, that we do it with a staggered appointments, a 1-year term, a 2-year term, a 3-year term, so that we don't have 5 people potentially leaving at the same time and no institutional knowledge remaining. In preparation for that, we are preparing a document of guidance documents, we call it, where we're trying to document everything we do, how we keep the minutes, how we set up a meeting, how we notify, Betty McDonough, all this kind of stuff, who we notify for the college schools, all the contact information, so that the next team that comes in has got a good starting point, and we'll certainly work with them when they do. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Gina?
Yes, I would just like to add that it's, I think, been extremely beneficial that we were able to have the online option for residents to donate. I think that it helped to generate a lot more funds for this year. And then I'd also like to thank Betty and the committee for always working with us and helping us to put out press releases and notify the public of everything that's going on. The team works really hard, and it's nice to have the support and, to help disperse the information. So thank you all.
Thank you. I'm sure all the selectmen have some kind words to say on this. So we'll start with, we'll go with seniority. Mr. Hogan. You're muted, Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bill, I think it's good to acknowledge that all of you may be gone in one swoop, although I would certainly doubt that we would get rid of people who are doing such a good job at what you are doing. But it may not be a bad idea to have that conversation about the staggered membership, so that we can guarantee that we will always have some people with institutional knowledge about what's going on. So thanks for bringing that up. But make sure you bring it up in the course of the year after this year's scholarships have taken care of, so we can get it on the agenda and
Sure.
Have a discussion.
Definitely, yeah, more closer to the time that it's going to be applicable.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Sheila, one quick question also for you. 25, we have students going to 25 different schools.
Yes, about.
I think we would probably come up with a list of 10 or even 15 that we know about. What's 1 or 2 of the schools that we might be surprised that we have students going to? How far away, or what would be a unique school?
Portsmouth Abbey in Rhode Island, which is a boarding school. Some students from Burlington have gone there, and Innovation Academy Charter School. So those are some of the other schools that you may not think of.
Okay, Thank you. And thank you for putting in the time and the service. One final question, if I can, Mr. Chairman. Do you have leftover funds that you roll over each year, or do you allocate all the money that comes in each year?
This year, so the first year we had $10,000, so we gave it all away, and then it's just as the money's generated. So we don't want to offer scholarships for money that we don't have. So this year, when I got the balance from Mr. Denizio, we selected 3 $2,500 scholarships. There's a little bit of wiggle room. There's some money left over for next year, and we hope to regenerate for the following year.
But it's not much
Thank
money.
you all.
It would not be enough to fund another scholarship.
No. But thank the 5 of you for all your hard work. And this is not easy to do. So will you guys also either come back with the list or invite the recipients to join us in the future so we can congratulate them?
Absolutely. We could do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, great work, a lot of hard work from the committee. I certainly appreciate that. I know under the circumstances, fundraising is very difficult. I applaud your efforts there. I would just like to say that I know I posted it on the residents' Facebook page. I believe I saw it. I believe Betty posted on the town website, and maybe some of the other selectmen posted on their pages as well. We're trying to get the word out there for you, but regardless, congratulations for all your hard work, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, I want to thank the entire committee for what they do. The online donations, was there? You said there was an increase, or that's how much came in from online donations?
I honestly don't know how much came in. Mr. Denizio would maybe have a better idea of that. We were able to, as a committee, approach the town and get the option to donate online. Before, you always used to have to send a check. You could not donate online to the scholarship committee, and we were able to get that part done. But we don't know how much gets donated.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask Mr. Denizio, does he have that breakdown?
Mr. Tigas, we don't have that breakdown right now. We'll try to get it for you, though.
All right, because I was just thinking if online donations have been successful, just maybe if we could promote that and other options such as pay apps like Venmo or Cash App, that might be a possibility just to expand it just a little bit more. But again, that's just a suggestion. But again, thank you and the rest of the committee for all the work you guys have done.
Thank you. Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, a huge thanks to the committee for all their efforts. This is a massive undertaking, and I really just want to call out and appreciate your attention to detail and effort around the visibility of all of this. I think that, to make sure that the kids and their parents and, the residents of the community are aware of this, you're all making a very concerted effort to, get information out there. And that's obviously, very, very important. If anybody wants to take a minute and let folks know what the best way to contact you if they have questions are, I would offer a moment of my time to do that if the chair would allow.
Absolutely. Someone like to give out that information?
Sure, you can contact us via email at scholarships@burlington.org. We also have a Facebook page called the Town of Burlington Scholarship Fund. And we can accept messages there as well.
I'm honored of the email, and I've had about 10 parents email me since we opened up applications this year, and I usually check it once a day and send out applications right away to parents or students.
Right. Thank you. So
We should probably also add for residents that are going to listen to this later on or that are listening now that applications are due by April 1st, 2021.
And they can be attained at the guidance department at the high school from Joe Adubato. I'd like to give a special thanks to Joe Adubato as well. He's our contact in the school department. He's a valuable asset. He deals with all of the scholarships that the high school has to deal with, and he's been a wonderful asset for us.
Well, thank you. Listen, I think that all the selectmen have said their thank yous, and now it's my turn. So you guys have done a fantastic job with this. I'm glad you brought up April 1st, because that was the only question I had that didn't get asked. So now we know that it is April 1st for that. You guys do an amazing job, we say, but thank you. And I'm sure all the residents thank you. And I'm amazed at that number of schools that put into that. Mind-boggling to me. So thank you for your time, your effort, and your dedication to the betterment of the children of Burlington. Thank you.
Very good. You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Denizio, back to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is an appointment at the fire department. And we have Chief Patterson and Assistant Chief Conity here to present a candidate for appointment. So if you wouldn't mind recognizing them now.
Absolutely. Chief Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight, as John said, we have one vacancy we're looking to fill due to the retirement of Captain Kevin Brown. So tonight, I present Thomas Cardwell for appointment. Thomas is a resident of Burlington, as well as a 2008 graduate of Burlington High School. He's been a civilian dispatcher with the Burlington Fire Department since July of 2019. He's a certified emergency medical dispatcher. He's done a great job for us over the past 20 months. He has a great knowledge on how Burlington Fire Department operates. He's certainly well respected and well liked by all members of our department. Thomas earned his paramedic certification through Northern Essex Community College. He actually completed his paramedic ride time at Burlington Fire Department. Obviously, he completed his paramedic program during a very challenging time with COVID-19. So his clinical and ride times had to be delayed until he was allowed to do the clinical and the ride time. He's a national registered paramedic. He's a Mass certified paramedic. He's advanced cardiac life support and pediatric advanced life support certified. Prior to coming to Burlington Fire, he was an EMT supervisor at Action Ambulance. He's a graduate of Salem State University, where he earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I'm pleased to recommend Thomas Cardwell for appointment to the position of firefighter paramedic for the town of Burlington.
Thank you, Chief. Listen, I didn't mean to laugh, but I could see the giggle on your face when there was someone lurking in the background of somebody else's screenshot there. I was like, where did he come from? You almost didn't keep a straight face, Mr. Patterson.
Well,
so anyway, I believe we're all going to say something really good about Thomas, because he's a great kid. I've known him his whole life. So we're going to need Mr. Denizio to do his thing, and then we'll go for a vote on this and speak about Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with the recommendation of the chief, I would like to appoint Thomas Cardwell to the position of firefighter paramedic for the Burlington Fire Department, and I ask that the board waive their 15-day waiting period.
So moved.
I'll move the seconded by Mike. We're going to do a roll call vote, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. So there's your vote, and now I will let Nick speak first. I don't know if you know Thomas, but go right ahead, sir.
I do not know Thomas personally, but obviously welcome. You know, your credentials speak, for themselves, and I'm sure that you will serve the town like any other one of our, highly esteemed, men and women. So welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As always, I love seeing when one of our new hires comes from within town. To me, it's extra special because he actually comes from the street that I grew up on. I know his family very well. I believe he comes from a long line of public service. Your uncle is a police officer. I think your grandfather was in the fire service. But again, I like seeing when such a qualified candidate is within our own town. And congratulations, Thomas, and welcome.
Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I had the great pleasure of working with Tom at the fire department, probably 12, 14 months before I left. Chief Patterson's right. Tom was certainly well-liked and well-respected in the department. I'm certain he's going to do a great job. I do have a question for Chief Patterson, however, before I leave. I noticed you can't get Tom into the academy, Chief, until August. Any chance we could do a little better than that?
Well, unfortunately, Mike, with COVID-19, the class sizes at the Mass Fire Academy has been greatly reduced. So they're only allowing 18 students per session at Stowe. So it's a little bit difficult. But there's always hope that something may break for him and he may get moved to, say, a July class.
Okay, well, let's hope so. Congratulations, Tom, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to a fellow Salem State University Viking. Tom, congratulations. Hopefully they're going to keep you on at the dispatch until the very last day in August when you go to the training. So we'll be looking forward to seeing more of you too. So congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Thomas, I see that you finally made it on the screen here. So
yes, I did.
We all want to say congratulations. We've been going through it. I'd just like to say you're a great kid. You deserve this. I remember when you were very small, coming to the shop with your little fire boots on and your little hat. And I always wanted to be a fireman from day one. I think your mother might have some pictures of those. So I'd hide them if I was you, just in case the fire department gets a hold of them. And birthdays are coming up. Who knows what's going to happen. So, but anyway, Thomas, I couldn't be proud of you. I think that's fantastic. You've always wanted to do this job, and your grandfather would be very, very proud of you right now. He was a great guy. He was a great fireman. He was a heck of a guy. So, kudos to you and your mother. Hope everything goes well, and congratulations on this. Really happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely been a long road, but we're here, and I appreciate it.
No problem at all. Okay, you're all set, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Denizio, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is an appointment to the Housing Partnership, and I believe Mr. Runyon is going to present this to the committee.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything you want us to eat? I don't think so. I'll probably have my pizza in that case because that's
It's a background noise there, Joe.
All right, who's speaking in the background? Is everyone mute except for Mike, please?
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's try that. Okay, yeah, we have a vacancy on the Housing Partnership Committee due to the resignation of Phyllis Etzel. Phyllis, who had served on the committee for close to 25 years. I want to thank her for her time on the committee. Her knowledge and her experience were invaluable to us over the years, so she'll be sorely missed. But I am pleased to welcome Rita Shah. I first got to know Rita 10 or 12 years ago. She did some work for us at COA, one of our outreach workers for some time. She's currently serving as the president of the Burlington Breakfast Rotary Club, and she's very, very much involved in the Indian American community here in Burlington. I see Rita at numerous gatherings around town throughout the year. So She's well suited for the position. That committee has been quite active as of late, and we look forward to working with Rita Shah, and I hope the board would support Rita for that position. Thank you.
So at this point, we'll go, Nick, Mr. Priest, any comments on this?
I just want to echo what Selectman Ryan was saying. Obviously, you know, a simple thank you is never enough for 25 years for, you know, Phyllis's time and dedication to the town of Burlington. So although my thank you is meek, I hope that it resonates a little bit. And then obviously, you know, I think that Rita is a wonderful addition and obviously very well suited for the position. So very happy to see.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had the pleasure of knowing Rita for, probably 20 years now. She is an asset to this town. She's an asset to the community. She's always there to help people. She works on numerous committees and well respected throughout the whole town. So she's just an awesome person. So she'll be, like Mike said, she'll make a great addition to that committee.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rita, congratulations. Yes, she's been involved in a number of things around town, and I know she's going to make a strong contribution to the housing partnership. And Mr. Chairman, or through you to John, who's actually making this appointment?
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. I clarified that with Betty today, who said it's a town administrator appointment, so I will make that appointment.
Thank you.
So you do not need a vote from us. It's just right?
I'll still need a vote. I'm ready to make that appointment if you're ready for it.
Okay. Well, let me just give Rita a little pat on the back because she is a wonderful person. It's just the way this town works. We always seem to get people that are just fit for a certain position, and she is definitely fit for this position. So congratulations, Rita. And I will take a motion at this point to appoint her.
No.
No?
Oh,
John is going to take the appointment.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But didn't he just ask me for a vote?
So first I have to appoint her. So after hearing from the board,
Head it
I
backwards.
would like to appoint Rita Shah to the Burlington Housing Partnership, and I ask the board to waive the 15-day waiting period.
So moved.
Second.
I'll move to second it. Okay. Now we'll have a vote. Mr. Hogan.
Yes.
Mr. Runyon.
Yes.
Mr. Tigas.
Yes.
Mr. Priest.
Yes.
Mr. Morandi. Yes. 5-0-0. Mr. Denizio, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Next item is landlocked parcel. As you may remember, back in the fall, the members of the Friends of the Landlocked Forest Group were here to update the board. And at that meeting, it was agreed that they would come back in the spring for an approval from the board to perform their meadow maintenance and clearing program. And I believe we have Martha Simons and some of our colleagues from the Friends group here that if you'd like to hear from them, and I believe John Keeley is also here.
Thank you, John. So Martha, you're back, which is fantastic, and you got to clear the meadow. So the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, we're actually here for two reasons tonight. And one is to schedule the meadow mowing that we had talked about. It is recommended that to maintain a meadow, you need to mow it at least once a year, and some places recommend twice a year. We don't always have the people power to do it twice a year, but we would like to continue to maintain the meadow, which is an important habitat for some of the animals that live in the landlocked forest. And it's a nice open space for people who use the forest to stop and take a break as well. We did start this project, I believe it was in 2016. The work gets easier after you get the first round of big vines and things gone, but we do to do it yearly, and there are still some areas we haven't gotten to that we wanted to get the bittersweet out of. So we sent you a notice, and I think the dates were March. We'd like to do it on March 27th. Is that the date that I sent you in the backup material? Does that sound right, people? Sunday, Mike or does anyone else have that date? I'm sorry, I didn't prepare right for this. I think it's, but it's either the 27th or the 28th of March with a backup date for weather for April.
I have, Martha, I have a date of April 24th or Saturday, May 1st.
Oh, okay, April, got it. Thank you. That's why I kept looking at the wrong slide. So it's April 24th, or if weather does not permit to do it on 2 weeks later on the May, what's that, the May, which date did you say? First, okay. That's a week later on May 1st. So we would like permission to go ahead with that meadow mowing project.
You said you had 2 items. Would you like to just do this one first? John, we have to vote on this, correct? Have them go in there, or with just an approval with the vote? All right, there you are. Okay. All right, so being the subcommittee to landlocked forest, this is a great idea. Martha was kind enough to wait until the springtime to mow this meadow down. You don't want it to get too big, too fast, so this would be a good time of year to actually mow that meadow down. It's not good in the fall, which we discussed at our last meeting because of the habitat and what the animals eat. So I'll take a motion on this one to mow the meadow down either April 20, what was it, Bob?
24th.
April 21st or rain date of May 1st.
Thank you for that, Mr.
I'll gladly make that motion that we do support.
Motion by Mike, second by Bob. We'll do a roll call vote, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Myself, yes. And I apologize for not letting anybody speak. I just realized. Sorry about that, guys. Maybe in a different place tonight. Does anybody have any comments about the forest being mowed at this point? Just the meadow area itself, nothing else. Or any comments, Mr. Runyon? Anything?
No, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I mean, this group has done an incredible job as stewards for the land up there. I applaud their efforts. And I'll tell you what, I was pretty darn impressed with the list of consultants you list in the backup material for mowing the meadow. Very impressive. But thank you for your efforts up there. We do appreciate it, really do. Thank you.
Mr. Priest?
No, just echoing what Selectman Ryan said. Absolutely.
Mr. Hogan?
No, absolutely. It's fabulous that this gets done, and there's such enthusiasm to do it.
Okay, Mr. Tigas?
No comments, Mr. Chairman, but just a big thank you to the group that takes care of it.
So as you can tell, Martha, we all believe that this is a great thing to do. And like I said, I'm very pleased that we held it off until the springtime. Now, I believe you have a second item.
Yes, thank you all for your support for the meadow mowing project. The second item, it has to do with moving a trail, and I want to recognize that there are volunteers for Burlington and for the landlocked forest, and we also have a huge support from the Greater Boston New England Mountain Biking Association, which is also known as NEMBA. And with me here tonight is Ed Parsons, who is a Burlington resident and member of NEMBA, and Mike Tabazinski, who is with the Greater Boston NEMBA group. They're much more familiar with the forest than I am, and I think that you may or may not know that there was a property that was developed that abuts the landlocked forest in Lexington in the last couple of years. We took out a piece of a trail, so that we need to move that trail back so that it's in the landlocked forest or on Lexington Conservation.
Wow, they're really relaxing the guidelines.
Who was that?
And also to make sure it avoids wetlands. So I'm going to ask Edward Parsons if he would explain the project. We did send in the backup material a map, so that should help you, help make it a little easier to follow. And also just in preface, because I expect this question, there are wetlands that it goes near. We will be going to the Conservation Commission to address those issues, and I'll let Ed and Mike give you all the details, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go right ahead.
So Ed, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Ed Parsons, a Burlington Town Meeting member for Precinct 6 and a NEMA member. And we're asking for permission to build a connecting trail in the landlocked forest along the Lexington line. And that is to replace a trail that once connected the landlocked forest trails to some conservation land in Lexington on two sides. As Martha has told you, residential development has recently been built on the Lexington side, and that goes over a popular trail that used to connect along the same route. That development is right up against the Lexington side of some wetlands, and so the best environmental option is to route around the other side of the wetlands into the landlocked forest a little earlier, rather than, as you see on the map, coming out from the Lexington side a little further to the south. And that will reconnect the landlocked forest and the Wright Farm conservation land in Lexington on both sides. The Lexington Conservation Department is supportive of this. The developer is paying for the wetland permitting and the materials for bridge building and trail building. And the trail work will all be done by volunteers from NEMBA that is, as you know, probably from previous projects, has considerable expertise, and we do a lot of trail maintenance and trail building throughout New England.
Well, thank you, Ed. I have a quick question before we go too far in this. The trail itself, the original trail that's gone, was it in Lexington's property? And then
it was on private land.
Oh, it was on private land.
Yeah, which has now been developed.
We had the boundaries wrong on that one trail, and that's how that happened.
No, I think the trail, developed over many years, and the land was undeveloped. It was about a 12-acre plot that was held in trust by a family that sold it to a developer a couple of years ago. And so they wanted the land for the residential development, and we had to move the trail elsewhere.
Okay, great. Martha, did you have anybody else that wanted to speak on this?
If I think Mike Tabazinski is here, but if people have questions that Ed can't answer, unless there's something, Mike, that you wanted to add to what Ed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, could I just pose one quick question?
Yep, go right ahead. I'm gonna go everybody. So
to whoever can best answer it, does the new trail or any part of the work that's going to be done, does it move into Lexington and then back to Burlington?
So yes, it connects to the Wright Farm in Lexington, and there's already an existing trail that connects between Burlington and Lexington a little further north, and it's in order to make the route so you can get back to Burlington further south. That's why we're rerouting the trail here.
I apologize, I didn't hear the whole list of people that you've gotten approval or support from. Does the town of Lexington need to give us any approval for going on their property?
Perhaps Mike Tabazinski can speak to that. I know that what you see in green going from the Wright Farm down towards Lexington, that's already built, and there's a little bit of trail that will cross in Lexington, a strip of Lexington conservation land. I believe that we're cooperating with the Lexington Conservation Group as well.
Okay. Okay.
All set, Bob?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, Mr. Runyon? All set, Mr. Priest?
Just a point of clarification. The Wright Farm in Lexington, that's town-owned land?
Yes, that's held by the Conservation Department, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as long as, I mean, for me anyways, as long as Lexington has no issue with it, I have no issue with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tigges?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only concern was already been answered. I asked whether or not Lexington had to chime in on the portion that's in their town, but that's already been answered. So other than that, no other questions.
Okay, the only question I have, Martha, is Mr. Keeley. I haven't heard his name tonight. Is he on board with this? Has he looked at the plans? Has he approved it? I didn't see anything from him.
I would like, Mr. Keeley's here, and if you
Oh,
could
he's here.
yourself.
Yes. So I walked the route with the team, and we actually worked it out, walked through, and tried to figure out the area to cross the wetlands with the least impact and avoid cutting trees and whatnot. So I think the route that they've picked is the best route. And once again, the Conservation Commission will have to approve it. They'll have to get a permit from the Conservation Commission because it does cross the wetland.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Keeley.
Sure.
I didn't see you on. You must have been on the other side of the page. I didn't see you. Sorry. Okay, so I think we're all pretty much in favor of it, but we still have to vote on it, providing that the next level is conservation, I'm assuming, right? Okay. I'll need a motion. Mr. Denizio, any further questions, comments?
No, sir. Everything I had was covered.
All right. So at this point, I'll take a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we support and approve the moving of the trail as presented to us tonight.
Motion by Bob, second by Nick.
Second.
Thank you very much. All right, gentlemen, roll call vote. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Diggis?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. Well, good luck. The next move is to conservation, so have fun and enjoy the mud.
Well, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank everyone for your support and us maintaining this wonderful resource that the town owns, and encourage everybody, as soon as the mud it makes it possible, or the warmth makes it possible, to use the forest, because it's really such a wonderful place. Thank you very much.
Yeah, using it's a wonderful piece of property over there.
Yeah.
We're very happy we have it. Thank you.
Support.
Okay, Mr. Denizio, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the top of the meeting, you mentioned that without Paul here, you hoped I didn't foul anything up during the meeting, but you'll be happy to know I followed something up before the meeting. So the next agenda item was sort of a miscommunication on my part about having it on the agenda, but it was for transportation, and there were some questions submitted by the town meeting transportation group that's been meeting in preparation for presenting to town meeting in May. And I believe they've been meeting with Marge, and Marge's in two meetings ago to present on the rideshare program. And the questions submitted by the town meeting group were more broad than the rideshare program. They had to do with policy, eligibility requirements, goals, the scope of transportation conversation as a whole, not just the rideshare. So some of the members and the chairman thought it might be better for us to form a subcommittee and get some members of that group in with some selectmen and some staff to just go over those questions and start thinking about that. So I apologize for this making it on the agenda and for the 50 emails I sent to Ms. Sickler and her colleagues. But at least we could take a minute to talk about that and maybe set up that subcommittee.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Someone's already reached out to me. Mr. Priest would like to head up that subcommittee as far as the selectmen go. So, Mr. Priest, that's going to be all yours. Would you like another selectman with you, or would you like to run this on your own? If anybody else wants to volunteer their time, Mr. Runyon, you would? You guys got his hand up over there, so you would.
Yeah, I was on that Beeline subcommittee for a number of years and involved in this right up till the end of the year. So I'd like to continue in that capacity with along with Selectman Priest.
Fantastic, great. Anybody for the transportation would like to speak on this? We're gonna have a subcommittee. Eileen?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Eileen Sickler, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. I'll swing it over to Millie Nash, our Chair of the Transportation Committee, but if some of you may recall, I think it was last January, that is 2020, where the town meeting formed an ad hoc committee, transportation committee. And our charter is to understand the transportation needs and demands of Burlington. No small feat. We've been interviewing different stakeholders and meeting quite regularly and getting through it. And we will be presenting a final report at the May 10 meeting. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues. And thank you, John, for falling on your sword there. Thank you.
So who is going to speak?
Millie Nash.
Before Millie does, will the questions be entered as part of the minutes? Okay, all right, good. And so Nick and Mike, should we expect to hear from you, or what's?
Yeah,
we haven't organized the committee yet, so once they do, we'll be able to formalize when they will start the meeting and what kind of deadline we'll need for a response.
Okay, we'll wait to hear from you. So, other folks on my committee, feel free.
Ms. Nash? Is she out there?
She has her hand up in the participants window. I don't, if she's on mute, perhaps.
I think she might be on the phone as well, or what have you. This is Dave Van Camp. I'm also on the transportation committee. And
Hi, Dave.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you for the moment. We do meet on Wednesdays pretty much every week now for a couple hours. So I think it might be appropriate for members of the board, Nick and Mike, to maybe speak with us during our regularly scheduled time. You know, it might cut to the chase. We're going to be running short on time. May's going to be coming up real fast. So I think just starting the conversation, you know, as early as perhaps this Wednesday might be appropriate. And then we can certainly meet and report further after that. You know, we are very much in fact-finding mode right now. And we've had a number of people come to us. We appreciate their time and appreciate your time as well. So I just wanted to make that available. I hope I'm not usurping Millie's authority, but we'd be happy to have you.
Okay, so Mr. Denizio, at this point, we're going to put Mr. Priest and Mr. Runyon on a subcommittee, and they're going to get together with the transportation people, and hopefully Wednesday they can go, and then they'll get back to us on this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Two quick things. One, Dave, when do you folks meet on Wednesdays? What time?
That would be helpful, wouldn't it? We meet at 7 o'clock.
AM or PM?
PM.
All right, and also I saw Mr. Strauss's hand up. I didn't know if in the participants window I saw a little flag go up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Priest. I just wanted to echo what Dave had to say. Part of our investigations and our fact-finding has found that the town of Burlington, transportation-wise, is very siloed. So any kind of interconnection or people sharing what they know and what they've done is going to be very helpful. It's a difficult problem, you know, that's evolved over the years, involves development, et cetera. So having this kind of coordination is certainly going to be very, very helpful in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Before we get going, Mr. Priest, I'm just going to apologize quickly because my screen doesn't seem to have everybody up here, so I'm not technology smart enough to realize if there's two screens I need to slide over or what, but if somebody sees a hand up for a question, please notify me, just in case I don't see it. John, I'm sorry for that. I didn't see your hand up for some reason. Thank you. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, transportation is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and a pet project that I wanted to have happen. I just hope that the folks from the transportation committee understand that, with COVID-19, our plates have been a little jostled, and so we definitely want to make this a priority again. As we're beginning to see the light at the end of that pandemic disguised tunnel, but very much looking forward to talking to you on Wednesday for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas, any questions, comments?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hogan?
No, I'm good right now. Thank you.
Mr. Runyon, you all set? Wait till the Wednesday meeting? Okay. So it was just here for discussion. That's all it was here for. So I think we're all set, right? Everybody good? Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you guys for doing a subcommittee on this. Appreciate it. Mr. Denizio, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this next item is a public hearing, but before we open the public hearing, we'll need someone to read the notice.
Who has that? Tim, do you have it?
Yeah, I have it. I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, the Burlington Board of Selectmen hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 8th, 2021, at or after 6:30 p.m. to consider the petition from Verizon New England Incorporated and NStar Electric Company doing business as Eversource for permission to relocate one jointly owned pole number 184 over P1, on the westerly side of Margaret Street at a point approximately 18 inches easterly from the existing pole. The plans and supporting documentation are available for public inspection by contacting Betty McDonough at burlington.org. I'm sorry, B. McDonough at burlington.org. The plans will also be available on the town's website.
That's it? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to make a motion to open the public hearing at this point.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second by Nick. Roll call vote. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. So first, would like to hear from, is Eversource here? Or who's moving the pole?
Mr. Chairman,
Wireless?
I guess this is a point of information or a question, really. So the public hearing that Selectman Tigas just read in said 18 inches, and on the documentation we have, it's 18 feet. So just in terms of like the public hearing opening and closing and what we're about to discuss, just want to gain clarity on if it's moving a foot and change or if it's moving 18 feet.
Mr. Denizio?
Mr. Chairman, before we open the public hearing, maybe we can have someone from Eversource or Verizon clarify that for us, if anybody's here.
Hi, yes. My name's James Watt. I work for Pike Telecom. I'm representing Verizon for this petition request. I visited the site today. The old pole has been removed, and it actually is 18 feet, not 18 inches. So it was 18 feet up the driveway. They moved the pole to the edge of the driveway, 18 feet. And the old pole has been removed, and all necessary parties have transferred over to the new pole.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
The public notice says 18 inches. Should I reread it and change it to feet?
Very good question. Mr. Denizio or Betty?
I'm sorry, Betty just came down to tell me that we could just amend the motion through from 18 inches to 18 inches.
Okay. Very good. So does that mean Mr. Tigas has to read the whole thing over again, or we have to make it a vote on the amendment and then read it again?
I would defer to Betty. She thinks. She may not be back in her seat yet.
I think she's getting in her seat right about now.
Please make an amendment, and you don't have to read the whole thing again. Amend it from 18 inches to 18 feet.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion. We have amended the public hearing notice to 18 feet from 18 inches.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion is seconded by Nick and Jim. Roll call vote on this, please, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. Okay, so that's been amended to 18 feet.
Mr. Chairman, we'll leave this open for 48 hours to make sure we have no issues with that from the public.
Okay. Okay. Has this pole already been moved?
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Okay. So it kind of went backwards, right?
Seems to be.
Supposed to do this first and then move the pole?
I was shocked to see it like it was already completed. Yes.
Oh, okay. Kind of lost then. What do we vote on? Put the pole back?
I know. I didn't think you would.
You never know.
Yeah.
Mr. Deason, where do I go from here? The poll's already been moved. Do we still vote on it?
Oh, well, I think you do open the public hearing, so we should hear from Eversource, NSTAR, and any members of the public.
We did vote on it. So, Ruth, you wanted a question? Yes, go right ahead. You're on mute, Ruth. Ruth, you have to unmute.
Okay. My name is Ruth Wren from Burlington. I'm a retired university librarian. I've been living in Burlington for 6 years. From previous testimonies that I've made to the Board of Selectmen, to the Small Cell Committee, and to the Planning Board, you're hopefully familiar with my great concerns about human health effects resulting from exposure to the excessive radiation emitted by small cells and 5G. I've previously also sent research from peer-reviewed journals of independent scientists about the harms of this radiofrequency radiation. Earlier today, I also sent links to 2 relevant lawsuits.
Ruth, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Mrs. Wren, can we interrupt you?
Ruth, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. That's on a small cell site. This is just about moving a pole.
Well, what I'm saying,
Excuse me, Betty. There we go. Thank you, Betty. Can you mute Betty for a second? Thank you. For some reason, the earphones make it double the sound in here. So, Ruth, this is just about moving a telephone pole. This isn't about the cell sites that we're going to be talking about later.
Oh, so shall I save this for later then?
Yeah, I believe this is something for later.
Okay.
All right? This is just to move a telephone pole. That's all this is. Okay? I'll call on you again. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak on moving the telephone pole that's already moved?
This is Scott Martin. I'd like to speak, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Scott Martin, Precinct 7. It's been moved. Why was it moved?
That I can ask. Why it's been done already? I don't have an answer for you today, though.
Why was it done at all?
Why was it moved originally? What was the request for have it moved?
I believe that it was up their driveway. They wanted it off their space. They wanted it further down the line, and it could have been something to do with aerial trespassing for some trees that are on the other side of the street on Center Street. But I didn't notice any type of issues on the new pole. And I didn't see the old pole there, so I didn't see what the
Okay, thank you. Jim, you had your hand up. Do you have an answer for that?
No, I don't have an answer. I have a request. If I'm not mistaken, this is the second time within the last year that a pole has come to us for approval after it's been moved. I'm going to ask that the town administrator's office go through engineering or DPW to let Verizon and NSTAR know that, put them on notice and say, we want to be notified before, approval first, then you move. This is the second time it's been done backwards, and I think we should not have a third one.
I will definitely make a note of that for Verizon.
Thank you, Mr. Tigas. Are there any more questions on this? Because I'm very close to saying that we're going to put this on hold until we have an answer from Verizon, how this happened and why it happened. It's already moved. Andy, did you have your hand up or you're just fixing your computer?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on a second, Mr. Hogan.
Okay.
Andy, were you fixing your glasses? You got your hand up? What are you doing?
Fixing my glasses, Chairman.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Mr. Hogan, go right ahead.
Thank you. And could we also get a report from the town administrator, either John or Paul? What's our recourse in the future if this continues to happen?
We can get that information.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the pole's already been moved, which is not the way things are usually done. My suggestion as chairman right now is to put this on hold until we get the answers on why it was moved, number one. We can answer Mr. Martin's question on that, and we can get an answer on how it happens that they just move a pole without having the permission from the town itself to do this. Any other comments, questions about that? Does that sound reasonable to the board?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Mr. Denizio, do I need a vote to put this on hold, or?
Well, I think what you could do is continue the public hearing.
I'm sorry, John, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I think what you would do is continue the public hearing.
Okay.
That will leave the item open and we can address it at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. So that's what I would like to do, gentlemen. I'd like to, go ahead, Mr. Runyon.
A motion to continue the public hearing till Betty, next date? March something,
22nd.
22nd, thank you.
At 6:30.
I got a motion from Michael. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Priest. I'm going to vote on this now. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Morandi? Yes. So we just put this on hold right now. We will get answers out to the residents on why it was moved and the way it was moved, okay? James, if you can help out with that in any way, get in touch with Betty at the town hall. We'll go from there, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Denizio, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is also a public hearing. This is a continuation of a public hearing from February 22nd. This is on this small cell application submitted. And we have got a whole host of folks here that's going to help us navigate this process. We have some counsel for the town, Donna Brewer, is online. We have consultant for the town, RF consultant David Maxon is online. And then the applicant is also online, which I think Ed is going to read that. So if you would recognize AT&T's team first, that would be great.
Do we need to read something for the public hearing?
No, Bob, this is a continuation of the public hearing, so
okay.
It was already open.
Thank you.
The public hearing is still open. Ruth, we're going to let you speak, but not right now. We're going to go through some other people first, and then we'll get to you, okay? I didn't forget you. I see you down there in the corner of my screen. I got you. All right. So AT&T. Who
Good evening,
is
Mr.
that?
Chairman. Can you hear me?
Who is speaking?
Mr. Chairman, Ed Parry.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I got you now, yes.
Terrific, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen, my name is Edward Parry, P-A-R-E. I'm an attorney at Brown Rudnick, 1 Financial Center, Boston, Massachusetts, 02111. I'm here representing New Singular Wireless, PCS LLC, which operates as AT&T. With me also on the screen is David Ford from Centerline, who does the site acquisition work for AT&T in the wireless space. We are here this evening to present our request to replace an existing light pole and install and incorporate a small cell facility within that light pole. Can I share my screen? Is that, do I need permission to do that?
Yes, sir.
Just a second while Betty makes you a co-presenter so you can share your screen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Give me 1 second.
Ed, you're on mute. Ed, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Got it? Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to get the report up here.
Ed, you're on mute. Sorry about that.
How is that? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on, I'm just having trouble getting the plans up. Here we go. My apologies. If you could hang on one more second, I'm just having trouble getting the cursor is right in where my plans need to be. You know. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Can you see the plans, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. My apologies. So there's an existing town-owned light pole. It's located near 44 Burlington Morrill Road. It's basically at the intersection of the Leahy Hospital and 44 Burlington. My arrow reflects where 44 Burlington is. 47-1231 is the lot number. The existing pole is located at this square here where I'm highlighting the existing street light. We had proposed replacing the pole, moving it slightly back, but that was just a concept by AT&T. We would remove this pole, put a new pole in this location here. I'd say it's somewhere about 6 feet away, but during the departmental review session, we may reconsider the exact location of the pole, but just to give the board a sense of what we're proposing to do. This is the elevation drawing of the existing light pole. The light pole itself is a little over 30 feet in height. The bottom of the light fixture is at 28 feet 7 inches, and this is what we're talking about removing. The only reason I raise that is I think we'll have a discussion about how we can try to achieve some consistency with the height of the light. What we tried to do when we designed the site was to match the height of the poles along that public right-of-way in the median strip. Let me see if I can move my, there we go. On the right-hand side of this elevation is AT&T's proposed light pole with the small cell equipment installed on and in the light pole. So at the top, as I said, we tried to maintain the same height as the existing pole. This is the canister antenna that AT&T uses. The top of that antenna would be at 30 feet as we proposed it. To incorporate all of the equipment into the light pole itself, there's a concealment module which contains what we refer to as the radios for the AT&T equipment. We would then move or replace the light fixture itself at this location here. which would be a bit lower than the existing light poles. And as I said, we may have a further discussion about the exact location of the light fixture itself. Second set of antennas, these are millimeter wave antennas. There are 3 of them. Again, in an equipment shroud, they would be attached at about 22 feet in height on the replacement light pole. And then at the base, we would have additional equipment and the electric meter to power the equipment and the light. On the left-hand side here, we had a depiction called out of the pole diameter from 0 to 10.5 feet. We have the equipment module, so it would be a 12-inch diameter for that length of the pole. Then from 10 feet 6 inches up to 25 feet, which is the top of the pole, it would be 8 and 5/8 inch diameter. The equipment concealment module up at the top of the pole would be 12 inches in diameter, and the antenna at the top would be 10 inches in diameter. These are just the equipment specifications, and everybody on the board should have a copy of this. This was all included in our application packets. I'm going to try to switch to something else here. Mr. Chairman, can you see the, am I still sharing?
Yep. I have a screen, yes.
So, terrific. So this is the existing street light that we're proposing to replace.
Oh, no. I don't have a street light. I just have a radio frequency report proposed with a cover of AT&T.
Oh, hang on. How's that?
I have nothing.
Pictures?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. Sorry about that. It takes me a minute to navigate, and you're behind. Seems to take a little bit to load. So these are the photo simulations that we provided to the board as part of our application. This is the existing street light, as I referenced in the plans, near 44 Burlington Mall Road. And this would be the replacement pole. As I said, we would, the base would be a bit larger in diameter, which would include the equipment. These are the millimeter wave antennas inside the shroud, the equipment shroud at the top, and then the top of the antenna. And we would move the lights, replace the lights, and incorporate them into the pole so that they match the poles along this section of the median strip. Is there a change in the map? Are you looking at a map now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It says AT&T locations, green dots.
Yes.
No, two green dots.
Green dot, there's a green dot, there's a green dot, there's a green dot.
So this is AT&T's existing. Some questions that arose at departmental meeting and some follow-up questions we received. This is a depiction of AT&T's existing wireless facilities in the town of Burlington. So the red line around the outside is obviously the town of Burlington. And then you'll see there are a series of 5 green dots. They are labeled MAL with 4 digits after them, or 5 digits after them. So these are the existing sites. I know there have been some questions about what AT&T has in the town at this point. So we have these 5 locations. We don't have any small cells at this point. And the proposed installation is here where the red circle is. So there was also a question of our existing coverage. Does everybody see this? It's entitled Current AT&T Coverage in Burlington. Mr. Chairman, can you still sharing?
I just got a hard copy of everything. So I have.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. This is the current AT&T coverage in Burlington. These are what we call AT&T thresholds. So this is what AT&T is looking to, provide green coverage when possible. And you'll see that where the sites are located, you get a good section of green coverage, and then as the signal gets further away from each of the sites, it quickly dissipates. So we're looking to get green. And in this particular location, as I said, here's the red circle here with the proposed small cell facility. It's located near the hospital, and that is to a great extent what's driving it. The commercial buildings nearby and the uses at the intersection and at the hospital. So this is AT&T's current coverage. We zoomed in a little bit on the southern portion of Burlington to give a sense of what our coverage looks like without this site. So this is the site. This is the small cell site again in the red circle. You'll see, obviously, we have good solid green coverage along the interstate. We have high connectivity, but again, this is a capacity site, which I'm sure David Maxon, your consultant, will cover in his presentation, but you'll see that once we install the facility, this blue and peach area will go to green to get us high connectivity with high data rates. And again, what's driving it is the traffic in the area and including the hospital. So we were asked during the departmental meeting to see if we could find something similar to what we're proposing to do. We don't have anything at this point in Massachusetts, which would be similar. We dug around the AT&T files. We came up with this installation, which is in Dallas, Texas, where actually AT&T is headquartered. So you'll see the base of the pole has the equipment. The top has the antenna, and then the equipment shroud just below it. What this does lack is the millimeter wave antennas at that 22-foot height location, and around here, as depicted on our plans. But I just wanted to give the board a sense of what an actual installation looked like of that.
Ed, your picture didn't change.
What? It didn't change?
You're still in the plots, Ed. You're still in the plots.
Okay, hang on. Give me 1 second, I have to reload. All right, so after saying all that, this is the, it's coming. You see this now? It's a depiction of a gray light. Okay, so this is the site I just rambled on about, which nobody could see. It's the location in Dallas, Texas. Here's the base, which is a little bit wider diameter with the equipment, the pole, the light fixtures, which obviously would be different based on the design in Burlington. antenna at the top, equipment shroud just below, and as I said, what this lacks is the millimeter wave antennas, which are contained in that shroud. With each of these installations, we bring fiber and electricity to the facility. We, as I mentioned, there is an electrical meter in the base of the equipment shroud. AT&T is responsible for all of the electricity, so I know there was some questions about running electrical lines and who pays for what. I could tell you that AT&T, pursuant to the eventual agreement, hopefully we reach with the town, will cover the electricity not only for the AT&T's transmission equipment, but also for the lights. We've submitted radio frequency reports from Don Hayes indicating that the site is low power and will comply with the FCC requirements with respect to exposure to emissions, and Mr. Hayes found that the emissions at a worst case with all antennas presumed operating would be about 10.2% of the FCC maximum. We provided responses to each of the questions and filing requirements as contained in the policy and small cell antenna guidelines issued by the town. I don't see a need to go through each one of them, but I'm happy to respond to any questions. I also received a list of some 20 questions, which we can go through if the board is so inclined. But with that, I think that summarizes what we're proposing to do, why we're doing it, where we're doing it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure there will be more than one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Denizio, would like to hear from the consultant first, or should we go?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we could hear from either our consultants, either Council Donna Brewer or Dave Maxon, before we hear from the public.
Okay. Who would like to go first, Donna?
Okay, I actually don't have anything to add right now. I think we'll come up with some questions, but the presentation is clear to me at the moment, and I'm interested to hear from Mr. Maxon.
Mr. Maxon?
That's my cue. Thank you. Hello, David Maxon with Isotrope in Medfield, working with the board on this, reviewing this application. I looked over the application, and it's a fairly straightforward description of the kind of small cell that conceals all the wiring and all the mess inside the container of the structure. On the Burlington small cell policy, you may recall seeing a photograph of two small cells on opposite corners on a street. One which is a very messy installation of exposed equipment, and then the other is one that is similar to the one that AT&T is proposing, where everything is tidy and contained within the enclosure. I really only have just a small list of sort of discrepancies, nothing really earth-shattering in reviewing the application. The application listed all of the frequency bands that AT&T uses in response to the question of what frequency bands would be on the pole. But in fact, the equipment as described does not have the lower frequencies at 700 megahertz and 850 megahertz. This is quite common for small cells. They use those frequencies to get the large area coverage from their cell sites. Then they use these high frequencies to cover small footprints at locations like this, where there's a very busy commercial area and office area and hospital space with a lot of people with a lot of cell phones that they're trying to use, plus all the traffic that's moving up and down the road when there is traffic. I don't know if you have traffic jams up there at this point with COVID, but when things restore to perhaps to normal there will be a lot more vehicles during rush hour that'll be also utilizing the services of that small cell. So I just noted that they said they'd be using these other frequencies, but they're not showing they have. If they do intend to use those frequencies, we ought to include those additional frequencies in the radio frequency emissions calculations because they're not presently included. The next thing is that this is kind of a chicken egg thing. Is this a lamppost with a small cell on it, or is it a small cell masquerading as a lamppost? And I ask that because they have used the National Electrical Safety Code as their structural standard, and that is generally used for things like utility poles and often lampposts because lampposts are often utility poles. On the other hand, if it's considered a wireless structure, which it kind of is because it's much fatter and has a lot more in it and a lot more surface area, antenna structures under the Massachusetts Building Code are regulated using the TIA 222 standard, Telecommunications Industry Association standard for antenna supporting structures. And so that would just be a question to ask the structural engineer of AT&T why they chose the standard they did for doing a structural analysis of this. Perhaps they can explain the reasoning. The next item I notice is that in the radio frequency coverage exhibits that Mr. Perry showed, exhibits 4 and 5, actually, not 4 and 5, 3 and 4, yes. 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I think was appropriate. They also included exhibits 5 and 6, which, according to the bullet list that describes what they are, they're zoomed in versions of the exhibits 3 and 4. But in fact, they're simply different versions of 3 and 4 because the policy and the wireless bylaw for zoning, which doesn't apply here, but it's referenced in the policy, asks the applicant to provide a coverage map with excellent, fair, and poor coverage. So I think that's what their second set of maps is showing. And I'm used to working with AT&T's coverage maps using the protocol they use for exhibits 3 and 4. So I just suggest that we don't really need to look at exhibits 5 and 6 and just not confuse ourselves with additional color plots and additional information that is sort of a variation on a theme. The next one is with respect to the radio frequency emissions, and this is often a very sensitive issue for residents. As I think the board is aware, and council can certainly back me up and straighten me out on this if I don't get it quite right, but under the Telecommunications Act of 1996, if the facility is going to comply with the federal safety standards, there is no further regulation to be done locally regarding the placement of the facility with respect to those radio frequency emissions. The applicant has submitted a report, which I'm almost okay with. I've certainly reviewed lots of reports by Mr. Hayes over the years and double-checked his math, and everything looks great except for one thing. The antenna on the top of the pole is a Galtronics, that's the manufacturer, antenna. And the model number that they presented is a model that is no longer in production. They ceased production on February 5th. So the new model is a kind of an upgraded, improved version that I assume they would switch to. The new model has a higher gain. Antennas are like a lens on a lighthouse. They focus the radio waves horizontally where they do the most good, just like the light of a lighthouse. So these antennas have slightly higher gain figures than some of the frequency bands that they operate on. So Mr. Hayes's calculations are not specifically with respect to what I would expect will be the emissions. It's a minor difference. It's basically more focused, which means less energy towards the ground or towards people standing on the median. or standing on a crosswalk or whatever might be there, and more energy horizontally so that it can get out to the buildings and the parking lots where people are using the signal. So that could use some clarification from the applicant's radio frequency engineer. The other thing is that the engineer's calculations were done appropriately with respect to the public safety limit, which is of course more conservative, more restrictive than the occupational safety limit. And on the ground around the pole, and as you move away from the pole on the ground, he has demonstrated that the facility will be compliant with a good safety margin with the federal standards if all of the radios were all transmitting at the same time continuously for a half an hour, which is what the standard says. It assumes a really worst case emissions condition. What happens with these poles, though, is that we now have street side infrastructure. Sometimes it's utility poles with cables and boxes on them. This time it's a light pole with 2 luminaires. And someone is going to be maintaining those, and I think that would be something that would need to be addressed between the occupant, the tenant, AT&T, on the pole, and the pole owner, which I assume would be the town, unless AT&T takes complete responsibility for maintaining the lights as well. But even so, they'll be sending a contractor out to maintain the lights, and to do that, they would be in a bucket, and they would be some 6 or 8 feet away from the antennas at the elevation of the antennas. It's not necessarily something the selectmen need to address here because the public safety question has been addressed, but it is an important thing if the town is the landlord for this facility, that it should be ensuring that in its agreement with the applicant to occupy this, the town's structure or the town's physical location, that there's an agreement to establish appropriate safety programs for workers. This is especially the case because the FCC's recent decision last year or so regarding radio frequency energy safety, they reviewed the safety standards. They decided they didn't need to adopt new standards, but they were going to impose higher criteria for establishing written safety programs. So it is important that the workers who are not AT&T personnel who might have to work on that pole to, as I say, maintain the lights, that they have the appropriate awareness and training to operate safely in proximity to it. If I just read my notes here. Oh, there is one requirement in the towards the end of the policy that talks about AT&T not using certain discredited international companies that would be inappropriate to do business with for one reason or another. I think that in my reading of it, it's kind of vague. It's not really clear to me what the criterion is for determining whether any of the equipment or the hardware that you're using on the on your small cell is not allowed because it's manufactured by an evil company. So I did make a suggestion in my report for looking at what the Department of Commerce calls an entity list of companies, and that's a place where you'll find companies like Huawei, the Chinese manufacturer of cellular communications equipment, on a restricted list. And then the last thing, there was a mention here earlier in the meeting about the height of the luminaires, and that is an important thing because when street lights are designed and installed, when they're done by illumination professionals, the lamp has a certain height because it has a certain spread of its light throw. So if the lamp height is reduced, the luminaire should have a broader spread to make up for the loss of height. And that is something that probably should be involved in the redesign of the the fixture as proposed by AT&T to ensure that you're not ending up creating dark spots along the road that were originally filled in by the higher elevation lamps. And that's basically my my take on things. I think just generally this is the kind of thing that we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the future. These companies are going to be looking for ways to repurpose lampposts, to find ways to attach to existing utility poles when they can, in order to get these lower power coverage footprints that are in areas of very dense, not only vehicle traffic, but dense usage by lots of people, all kind of in a small area. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry about that. This has probably been one of the busiest meetings we've had so far. So before we get into the public speaking, I'm going to go through the board members to see if they have questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Tigas.
Thanks, Chairman. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. I was going to wait till the end, but I do have one question that was brought up by Mr. Maxon. And I'm going to direct this question to him, to Andy Ungerson. If I'm reading this correctly, it looks like, yeah, there's a lot of technical stuff, so I'll just do it what I can understand. It looks like the pole is wind tested for 40 miles an hour. They use the standard that's used for a light post or a light lamp post or a utility pole. My opinion is this is not a typical lamp post or utility pole because it has that big antenna on top, which changes its center of gravity, and if a wind blows, it's more likely. I mean, we saw how many poles come down without an antenna on top. So, Mr. Maxon, am I understanding that this wind test used or the standards used, simple lamp post or a light post, utility pole, and not for something with an antenna on it?
The standard is that you look in a table and you find out what's called the basic wind speed for a lamppost application is. But then what they do the calculations with is not just a skinny lamppost. They do the calculations with the dimensions of the proposed facility. So this is a fatter lamppost. They're doing the calculations with the fatter lamppost. With ice accretion on a fatter lamppost, there's going to be a lot more weight on the lamppost because there's going to be more ice in an ice storm. So all of those things are covered, but they're covered under the National Electrical Safety Code, which appears to be less stringent than the TIA antenna structure code. I was surprised to see the basic wind speed of 49 miles an hour. I'm not a structural engineer. There may be perfectly good reasons why the gentleman who prepared this analysis chose those criteria. So I think it's appropriate to ask, please explain your work, show your work. And let's get the response and see if there is a good rationale for what they've done to do the calculations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct that request to the applicant to come obtain that information as far as how they came up to they arrived at this conclusion, because I know in town, especially on the Mall Road where it's wide open, we get winds higher than 49 miles an hour. And the additional height, weight, the change in the center of gravity of the pole, that's a little bit of a concern. That's a big concern for me right now. So I'll end it there because I know a lot of people have questions, but that was the one thing that jumped out at me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
yes,
Chairman,
sir.
I just quickly respond.
Yes, sir.
Great. So, yeah, we'll get the, first of all, we want to comply with the code, whatever it is, whether it's a lamppost or a wireless facility with the proper wind loads, Hudson Design put these structural together. We will get that answer. We received, and I don't say this to be critical, we received, the issue late this afternoon. We could not get a response from our engineer in time, but we will certainly get the board comfortable. We have no intention of violating any codes. We don't want the pole to come down. We're not looking to be the skimp on what we're attempting to do. The pole will be solid, and we'll prove it to the board that it's solid. I'm not a structural engineer. I don't know if anyone here is, but we will get the proper documents to the board.
Thank you. All set, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, you're all set. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Maxon, a couple of very quick questions. You also said that you're not a structural engineer. Could you give us a bio of who you are and why we're listening to your expertise? And I'm not asking that to be fresh. And then the next part of that is, who else should we be listening to? Should we be getting a structural engineer? Who else should we be listening to answer questions for us, like the wind speed? And quite frankly, Mr. Ferre, that if it says that it's okay to have that for 49 miles an hour, I probably might not vote for that, and I might make a motion to make it 59 miles an hour. So you can get your standards, but if we're going to be looking for something stronger, we may ask for it. So, Mr. Maxim, if you could answer that question, I'd appreciate it, the question I've asked you.
Let's see, I'm unmuted. Yes, thank you. No, great question. First of all, just a quick aside. Basic wind speed is a technical term, and it's defined in the standard that the structural engineer is referring to. And so when it says 49 miles an hour, we don't really know all of the details of what that means. That often means that there are, that it's allowing for gusts and other kinds of things. So again, this is something the structural engineer can answer. And it might be in the interest of the town to have a structural engineer review this engineer's review. Alternatively, the Massachusetts Building Code controls this, so your local code enforcement officer is responsible for making sure that the final product meets the state standards before a construction permit is issued. So it could also be something that you could just ensure is delegated and called attention to the code enforcement officer rather than this here and here. Now, as far as my background is concerned, I started my career as a broadcast engineer, worked for the classical radio station WCRB for 20 years or so, and did consulting on the side. And then a wireless industry came along, and they needed people who were not embedded in the wireless industry to look over the shoulder of the wireless industry in reviewing applications and citing wireless facilities and that sort of thing. So as my career progressed, I began to use my radio frequency engineering skills to evaluate cellular applications and facilities. I also do design and construction of radio communications facilities in other industries. So I have a wireless communications professional certification from the the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, IEEE. I'm a member of the International Committee on Electromagnetic Safety, which is the committee. It's an open, unbiased standards committee that reviews the scientific literature and then develops safety standards and recommends them to the world. We hoped the FCC would adopt our more recent standards, but they stuck with their 1996 standard because they didn't want to upset the apple cart and change anything. I have experience in actually being a project manager, overseeing the construction of radio towers and radio communications facilities. And I could happy to circulate my my CV as well if you'd like.
Okay. No, I just wanted to hear what you know, just explain who you are, because I'm sure someone in the town knows who you are, but I just wanted to hear it. One very quick question, and you can give us a very quick answer. In one of the sections on one of the pages, it says that no small cell wireless installation shall be installed on poles which are not ADA compliant. What ADA compliance on a pole are they looking for?
Yeah, it's actually, as I think you know, Burlington was way ahead of the curve on responding to the FCC's small cell ruling and was one of the first to adopt regulations. And these are very comprehensive regulations that you have. When you have utility poles, basically on sidewalks, ADA says you need to have a certain clearance to get around that utility pole without any obstruction.
Okay, gotcha. I was just concerned that, you know, people who shouldn't be climbing poles were being forced to it. I apologize if that sounds foolish, but I read it and it made no sense, but your explanation does, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have something to
Yeah, real quick, Selectman Hogan, that was part of the one of the requests of the committee, because they wanted to make sure, again, the height of the equipment, and to make sure that it wasn't a pole that wasn't, say, in the middle of a walkway or sidewalk. So we wanted to make sure that persons with disabilities could navigate safely around a pole. It was just a little extra, you know, safety measure that we added into the policy.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Priest, questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, both. I'll probably take them in reverse order. First, to Mr. Pari, just want to thank you and AT&T's understanding and patience with us as we navigate this process. Obviously, as Mr. Maxon said, being so far ahead of the curve doesn't exactly lend yourself to point to others and saying that's how they did it, and thus making the process easier. And so because you're our first, we are taking our sweet time. And so, you know, thank you for bearing with us during our understanding and, you know, evaluation, because really what's going to happen here is that we're going to wind up setting a precedent for ourselves as a community. I think that we want to make sure that we have the right footing moving forward. With regards, I know a lot of folks in the community, you have mentioned things around health and safety. Obviously, as a board, we're, you know, doing our best to make sure that, you know, whoever's trying to bring 5G into the community is doing it, you know, in the best way possible. It has to meet federal compliance. You know, we can't impose our own health and safety regulations that goes against that, you know, and it could cause a whole boatload of issues. And so, you know, I just hope folks in the community understand that, you know, that's a federal thing that we wish we kind of had a little bit more authority to kind of, you know, discuss and move forward with. But as long as applicants are being compliant, that's, you know, what we're after. Now to my questions. During your review of a couple of the slides of the application, you showed some coverage reports, the blue dots, the blue and green coverage. With regard to the location of the pole, I know that Mr. Ungerson had asked during a prior review whether or not the pole behind 44 Mall Road would be a sufficient place. And so, given that we're talking about a matter of, I can only imagine, less than a quarter of a mile in distance, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, would that affect coverage from this location to that location?
Yeah, and I think that came up during the departmental meeting. So I did take a look. The poles behind 44. First of all, the one issue is they're all in residential. It's all a residential zoning district. So, you know, that's an area that we certainly stayed away from based on the criteria of the policy and requirements. But to get a sense of what these small cell facilities are really done for capacity, so that it can handle, you know, large volumes at and around the location, and it also helps offload the macro sites. So, and by macro site, I mean the the full antenna arrays that are on towers, water tanks, and that sort of thing. Those 5, locations that I showed you at the beginning. The millimeter wave antennas are having a smaller footprint. So, on average, we're looking at about 1/8 of a mile for a small cell facility. If there's not any blockage, then they may go a little bit further. With the millimeter wave antennas, we're talking about hundreds of feet. So if I can go and share, because I spoke to the, can I share my screen again? Am I still on?
Not at this time right now. Just try to answer the question the best you can. Before you finish that question, I just want to put it out there. There's a lot of people out here with their hands up. I can see them all. I have another selectman I want to get to. I know Kristen Kaz is on this right now, and Andy Augustin. I'm going to get to them first, and then I will go to citizens. And Ruth, yes, you will be first. You were waiting very patiently, and then we'll go from there.
Gotcha.
Okay? Sorry, Ed, but go right ahead, sir.
So what you would see in those coverage plots, and, the information that I'm sharing this evening, I will send through Betty so that everyone has hard copies. But you'll see where the millimeter or the small cell facility, the coverage ends when it hits the building. So when it hits, obstructions, the signal dissipates and we can't maintain the coverage. So when I send you the coverage plot through Betty's office, you'll see that you can tell right where the buildings are because the coverage will go to peach. So it goes from green to blue, then immediate to peach, and you can see it's where 44 is located. So the signal is not going to, if we put it on a utility pole behind 44, we did look at those after that meeting. We're not going to get the coverage that we're really trying to get over at that intersection, especially because of the hospital.
Thank you, Ed. Nick, you're on mute.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. So let me table that for a second. I know that there was discussion around the possibility of saying, no poles, and then what does that mean? And then the answer was, well, then individual poles of your own would go up that would be separate from the light post poles. I think that, and I'm just speaking in general terms here, I think that would be worse than, lamp poles with, or the chicken egg that Mr. Maxim mentioned, right? Is it a wireless pole or a lamp pole with wireless in it? I think those would be preferred over us just having various folks throw up poles everywhere in between our poles. That would probably look worse aesthetically throughout the town. But then I guess to Mr. Maxton's question and to my question from the prior meeting around the safety around the light throw, height change versus spread, is it possible to maintain the lights at their current set? And if so, does that mean that the antenna raises 2 feet plus or minus, or is it all possible to move the antenna below the lamps, to fill that void?
Yep. And so we did ask our engineers that question after our meeting. We cannot move the canister antenna down below the light post of the light fixtures. The millimeter wave antenna can stay there. So what we did was we looked at a redesign where we would move the light fixture up to its current location, at roughly that 28 feet. I think the pole is going to get to be, the top of the antenna would get to be about 34, 35 feet. Now that brings, other issues because, we're dealing with height. I don't think it's certainly not impossible, but we'd need some flexibility. Under your rules, I believe we're allowed to go up to 30 or 32 feet or 10% of the average height of infrastructure in the right-of-way. So with the existing pole being 30 feet, 10% high would be about 32. So, we're kind of nibbling at the edges, but it's something that I think we can work through. So we could maintain the light fixture. The other question I think that you asked was whether we could install the pole at the exact location where the existing pole is. And I think Donna had raised the question with respect to the light and public safety issues. We can do that. The one, caveat I would offer to the board is that if we're going to replace it, it's going to be down for some period of time. Typically this would get done in a matter of a week. So we could be, looking at a situation where we take the light pole down, do whatever work we have to do, install the new one. The, light could be dark for, during that construction period, but, we could use the same location, which I felt was pretty good news.
Okay. I mean, I have plenty more questions, but I know that a lot of folks want to talk, so I'm going to table myself, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions really, but I did want a couple of comments. This is our first small cell hearing that we've had. Unfortunately, I think you couldn't have picked a worse location for our first hearing. It's being a town-owned pole. It's a crosswalk it gets a lot of use. That stretch of roadway for years has, there's been a lot of talk about aesthetically improving that whole stretch of Mall Road. Now here we have, the town has made and developers have made a significant investment in those architectural light poles that we have here. I really wish we could have got our feet wet somewhere else in town on a pole that wasn't ours and wasn't as much in the spotlight as these ones are. Those are just a few of my thoughts, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So, like I had said earlier, there's a couple of people. Mr. Ungerson, any comments or thoughts on this being the working in the building department?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last meeting we had, they were going to come back to us with whether or not the base presently there with the lamppost would have to be removed and a new base would have to be installed. I'm just curious about that. The present pole that's there now is got signage on there for Leahy's emergency room directional. Will they allow signage back on that new pole for Leahy's emergency room direction? The town, as Selectman Runyon had mentioned, has done a lot to improve the aesthetics of that roadway, also including the ability of banners or flags to be hung on those. I'm looking at Google picture right now of Burlington Mall Road, where all the other lampposts of the same design have the ability of banners or flags to hang from these. Will the town be able to put those back? I'm not 100% sure if the town owns the power that is under the street there, and if that's the town's power for the street lighting, who is going to control that meter that they're going to be putting in for their power source? Is that something that the town has to monitor, or is that something the power company will do? I believe that that's the town's utility underground. Potentially, I think Mr. Sanchez, Department of Public Works department head, would probably be able to help us out with that if no other selectmen would possibly have that information. And with what Mr. Maxon had said earlier, any change in elevation of the lamp fixture itself is definitely going to create an aesthetic disruption with our illumination of that street, especially right there where we have a major intersection, a crosswalk for the hospital, for the assisted residential care on the other side, and the use that roadway gets. Could Mr. Maxon possibly tell me what would be the difference of their coverage being potentially put on this pole that they're questioning now and the telephone pole that's about 200 feet off to the northerly direction of this pole? It sits higher than the buildings themselves at 44 and 54 Burlington Mall Road. how much interference would those buildings give to their broadcast of the frequency? With that, I think that's all I have for questions now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Ed, I'm sure there's a couple of questions that he asked you that we can defer to for you can get the answers back to us on that one there. Right now, I'd like to hear from Kristen Kasner. I know she's on here. So Kristen, any comments?
Hello all, good evening. I agree with everything Andy has mentioned. I know engineering and DPW in the past has concerns about maintenance of the light pole with this equipment on it and things like that. But I think overall, I mean, we put the regulations in place, we put the bylaw in place, understanding that this was something that was moving forward. We want to make sure we can figure it out, have whatever control that we can have to understand it in a way that we want to, that meets local goals. I do appreciate the comments from Mr. Maxon about a lot of things that many of us do not understand. So I think you've built a very good team here too, especially with Attorney Brewer as well, to really navigate all of this with us. And having worked with Ed Perret in the past for AT&T on not small cell but other things, I think he's also one that's been more agreeable and better to work with. We've worked with a lot of cellular and wireless companies, and I'm pleased with the ability to have these conversations like this. So at this point, I don't have a lot to add other than just the basic questions that were summarized already by Betty for the previous questions about structural and maintenance and just general aesthetics and options. And also just what, you know, the rollout plan from here. It was interesting to hear about the AT&T, the other areas that AT&T has. What's that kind of larger plan to move forward? So, I mean, I think this, I know those that are online that are concerned about the health perspective, that's not an aspect that we are able to oversee under the regulation right now, but I think it's something that we're going to need to understand the technologies moving forward. So I appreciate all that has provided input, and you know, I'm here for questions, but I'm not an expert, but we'll be happy to do what I can to understand this and move it forward the right way for Burlington. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Donna, you had a question for us or a comment?
I did, yes. Mr. Perret, in a few places in the application for the response, you noted that you were acknowledging the requirement of the town's regulation or policy, and that was all you were doing, as well as saying that it might be preempted by state or federal law. So I was wondering if you could tell us, are you in fact intending to comply with the policy, or are you claiming that those things that you noted are in fact preempted, and if so, how?
Yeah, that's a good question. You'll see that repeated throughout the application. So this particular installation does not, I believe it complies with all of the standards. I mean, there are some subjective standards that are there, but what we don't want to do is to acknowledge that, because in this instance, our site complies. So I'll give you, for instance, you have a small cell separation policy as part of your requirements. I think that is just, would be preempted under federal law, but we don't have any small cells in Burlington, so we don't violate that provision. On the other hand, there may come a time when we apply where we may violate that provision. I don't see it at 150 feet, but you know, distance separations are generally prohibited under the FCC order. So while this installation is not problematic, you'll also note that I always start with, while reserving our rights, because I don't want to make I don't want to make an application, say that we comply with this, and then come back later and say, well, that's preempted. So it just avoids the conflict. I can't think of anything where we are worried or asserting any sort of preemption on this one because it's the first one. Now, there may be, some issues that, arise as we work through this that, might become problematic. I don't know. In other words, if some standard were to be imposed with respect to the emissions, that would be problematic. We show that we comply, we acknowledge compliance. But if for some reason the board said, well, it has to be at X% and not what the FCC standard is, then, we would have that discussion then. But I will go through each of those, but if we were going to look to preempt something, you wouldn't have gotten an acknowledgement. So we're acknowledging the policy because we comply, but I will go through each one of them painfully again, and if there's anything of concern, I'll point that out.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
On mute, Chairman.
I knew that. I was just testing everybody. Mr. Denizio, any comments on this prior to me opening it up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we go to the public, for public comment, if we could have everybody mute themselves and raise their hand, and we could have Betty unmute the people who have their hands raised so we can keep it somewhat orderly. If you're called in on the phone, you can press *3 to raise your hand, and we can go that route and see how it works. That way we only have one person talking at a time.
Thank you, Mr. Denizio.
I know who you're picking first.
You know exactly who I'm picking first. All right. Is everyone okay with that? So, Ruth, the floor is yours.
So I'm Ruth Rinn, retired university librarian. I've been living in Burlington for 6 years now. I'm here to express concerns about human health effects resulting from exposure to excessive radiation emitted by small cells. Regarding the 1996 FCC radiation standards themselves, there are currently 2 relevant lawsuits to be aware of. One is by the City of Boston versus the FCC, challenging the FCC's lack of adequate investigation into these effects. And the other is by the Environmental Health Trust, challenging the FCC's antiquated safety standards for wireless devices. Court decisions on these 2 lawsuits are pending. I'd like to relinquish the rest of my time to Cece Doucette, technology safety educator, director of wireless education, and founder of Massachusetts for Safe Technology.
Thank you, Ruth. Is that the statement you'd like to make for tonight?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, may I clarify one thing?
Absolutely.
I think most people know, but when I said raise your hand, that means virtually in the meeting. At the bottom, there's a little reactions icon. You click on that and raised hand. I didn't want everybody to just be raising their hand and wonder why we were calling on them.
Okay. Thank you. Cece Doucette, you've had your hand up for quite some time now, so go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. Like many of you, I had no idea there was anything to even think about as far as safety goes with wireless. And then an electrical engineer friend of mine at book group one night tipped us off that there are actually biological effects. So Ashland became the first in the nation to even have this sign hanging in our classrooms to take precautions. With cell towers, because the industry is putting a lot of them on school grounds, but also with the wireless inside the building. So that's how I got involved in this. And Ms. Rinn is right. There are lawsuits happening right now against the FCC. So in addition to the 2 that she spoke of, there's a 3rd one that just started in the last week or 2. So right now, if you own your own property, you could put, say, a satellite dish on your roof, which is a one-way transmitter. what the FCC and the industry have done is to change the OTARD rule, which is the over-the-air radio device rule, so that now they could go to your neighbor and say, hey, you know, you don't have any street lights in your neighborhood. If we give you a kickback, can we please put a cell tower up on top of your roof? So what that does is it bypasses all of local control. And so we don't want our neighbors putting these small cells or any kind of wireless communication facility on the rooftops, because that will pulse that radio frequency radiation out to the entire community. So that's a new lawsuit that you should be very much aware of. And you might want to have Special Counsel Brewer take a look at your small cell policy to see if there are changes that should be made to protect as best you can the citizens of Burlington. So that's a new lawsuit. And for the other lawsuit that Ms. Rinn mentioned at the federal level, they had oral arguments at the end of January. And in the oral arguments, there were 11,000 pages of testimony submitted that had been opened in an FCC docket and submitted. And as Mr. Maxson indicated, the FCC did not do their due diligence and respond appropriately to the volume of science that was submitted. And so when they went before the federal courts on January 25th, the judges were calling them out and saying, so wait a minute, you as the FCC admit you have no medical expertise on staff. And secondly, because the FDA told you you don't have to change your public radiation exposure limits, you said, okay, we won't. Well, where's their due diligence with the FDA? So these judges were not pleased with what the FCC submitted, and they will be making their ruling in the next 6 months or so. So any way possible to stave off these 5G small cell antennas, you would be doing a wise investment in your community. And in fact, today I was brought into Colorado to present, and there are many, many communities in Colorado that are not buying into the wireless bidding and putting up all this toxic small cell infrastructure. They are instead opting for hardwired fiber all the way to the premises. Don't just run it down the street and then throw up all these small cell nodes, which are going to spray the entire community with toxic microwave radiation. Instead, bring the fiber to the premises, whereupon you just pick up indoors with Ethernet cables and little adapters you can buy for your iPhone, your Androids, your Chromebooks, everything.
So I'm gonna stop you for 1 second, CC.
Sure.
And I'm gonna ask you, do you have specific questions on this? It sounds like you're making a statement against this, which is fine, but I just want to understand where we're coming from. Where do you live in Burlington because I know most of the residents, and I'm sorry.
No, I actually live in Ashland, Massachusetts, but a lot of our members, we have a number of members on Massachusetts for Safe Technology who are from Burlington, and Ruth Rinn, being one of those members, asked me to speak on her behalf tonight.
Oh, okay. All right. So is there specific questions that you have for either side of this?
Yeah, one of the questions I have is when Mr. Hayes submitted his RF exposure compliance documents, are those theoretical or are those actual? Because there can be a big difference in what is actually in the community versus what they put in their paperwork for theoretical exposure. So the town would be wise to really look at that, because when the radiation hits certain objects, there can be bounce back effects that could be increasing the exposure levels versus the theoretical that they may be submitting to you. So that would be one question for them to answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And then
you can answer these questions later. Right now, I'm trying to get through as many residents as I can.
So Ms. Brewer, Ms. Brewer and Jim Tiggis and the rest who sat on that small cell committee, thank you very much for setting up what has now become a national example with the Burlington small cell policy. This is being used all over the country. And Ms. Brewer, I believe you know of other communities here in Massachusetts that have already adopted your small cell policy. Would you be able to comment on which towns have done that?
I am aware of that, but honestly, I think our time is better served right now with focusing on what Burlington has to consider. You did mention a few things. I do want to let everybody listening know that we do have a policy in place and a zoning bylaw in place so that these things cannot just go up on private property without getting permits from the town. So the concern you had about putting these things on roofs and people just letting them go up on their private property is not something that is unregulated by the town under current policies. I am certainly aware of the lawsuits that are currently pending to challenge the 1996 FCC radio frequency emission standard, as Mr. Maxon said. It is rather out of date at the moment, but as you are aware, Ms. Doucette and others, the Ninth Circuit, in a recent decision at the end of 2020, reviewed all of these concerns and questions and said that no, it was satisfied that the FCC had done what was appropriate to do and upheld the current 1996 emission standards. So until we get some new law, at the moment we are bound by the 1996 regulations. And as Mr. Maxon has said, he is satisfied that the current application complies with the current law. And unfortunately, that precludes any further action by us. We can hope that these lawsuits will succeed and new standards can go into place, but at the moment, that is what we are left with. So we certainly hear everybody's concerns about radio frequency emissions, but our hands are tied by that. We are also limited in how long we can string this out. The FCC, in its infinite wisdom, limits communities to 90 days from the date of the application for a new facility to make a decision. So we do not have the power to string this out until we see if some new law comes down.
Okay.
So if there is new law, we can apply it to a new application, but the time is ticking on this one.
Okay. One of the lessons that I picked up in Durango, Colorado today is that there are separate regulations around Americans with disabilities. So if, for example, a Burlington citizen were to file an ADA disability, they are protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the, well, our government already recognizes electromagnetic sensitivities, so Burlington would be obliged under the law to provide accommodations.
We're going to hear for strictly questions, Ms. Doucette. I'm not going to get into a debate on this right now. We can do that later on. Right now, we're specifically here for questions. And at this point, I'm going to ask a few residents some other questions. Okay? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Kristen Russo, you had a couple of questions. Christine, I'm sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for giving me the time tonight, and I want to thank all the previous speakers before us. You know, we all come at this in different areas and different ways, and because it's just such a big thing we're facing in town and all towns. So I appreciate everybody's different angle. So I have a number of questions that sounds like might not get asked. So I'm not sure how they're getting answered, but if they can be noted to go further. So some of my questions relate to the map and Mr. Maxon said, take out 5 and 6 because that was confusing me how we were getting those different colors. But in looking at the maps, 2 out of 4 times that antennas have come across the towns that I've lived in, they have been falsely shown gaps in coverage. So looking at these 2 maps, the current version and the proposed does not seem to have much of a difference. So I don't know if Mr. Maxon had the ability to go through and verify that there really is this capacity data that we're not seeing, and how the AT&T was able to verify that, if that could be verified also through an independent RF engineer, because we've seen in the past that angles of antennas get turned and things of that nature. So that's one question. The other question is, we're talking pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. We used to have 100,000 people come into our town or more a day. And it's very well known right now that they're expecting these offices, to the detriment of our town funds, but they're expecting that many of the offices aren't going to return at this 100% level. So in looking at this application right now, were we looking at the capacity for pre-pandemic? Are we looking at data for now? And then what are we looking at for post-pandemic? Because I do think there will be a very big difference for capacity. It was mentioned Leahy's across the street. They are going to be full speed ahead, but you do have the Chase building and other buildings around that may or may not be full. Third question, if I can keep going. All right, so third question is with regard to these small cells. This is an interesting location because the elevation that we have of the buildings are almost directly in line with the top of the telephone poles where they are. So, they said they looked at co-location, but they only looked at right away. So I'm not sure why the applicant only looked at right away, didn't look at using the buildings, the roofs of the building, that Chase building across the street. You have the parking garage at Leahy. Did they look at any of those locations? Is that something that Mr. Maxon would be able to look at? And where we have so many questions about the light structure, is it a light pole or is it a cell tower? That was, an excellent point that was made. And then you have the structural analysis of it also. So with this small cell, you have 40 Mall Road, you have 240 District Ave, they have cell antennas on them. And how come it's the light post and not necessarily where we have this elevation of the buildings right in line with your telephone pole height, how that got determined. And then again, proving the gap. They talked about defining a research ring. Is that ring applicable? Is it, are they making the ring so it does look like there's that capacity? I don't know if Mr. Matson, it sounds like he's done a lot of work, and I commend the selectmen and appreciate the town for putting this, work in up front. I don't know if an independent peer review necessarily had been done prior to tonight. If not, if that is something that we can do. And then looking forward, you're looking at the map and it's all right behind it. So are we going to see this company again within a month or two looking to fill in all the red behind? What's the ultimate goal here? And because our goal as a town is to, fulfill the build out needed with the least amount of of devices to protect our residents. You know, you're our first and only defense with this. There's no FCC guidance. There's no regulation, and this will not be registered by the FCC because it's under 200 feet. So I am very pleased to see that we are doing our due diligence, that you're taking the time necessary to get all these questions answered, because we're under 200 feet. We're not testing it. I'd also like to advocate that we independently test once a year the cell sites. We have no idea if they're actually working. And when they have been independently tested in other towns across the country, they have seen many, many instances where they're over that FCC limit. And it could just not be any fault of the companies, you know, just over time, there's wear and tear and changes. So, you know, I really want to see the due diligence done, an independent review, especially with the maps, what we're looking at, coverage, capacity, and is this, you know, post pandemic, what are we looking at? Because, you know, that we need to make sure that we get the maximum control with what we're given. So thank you.
Thank you, Racine. Edward, did you get those questions? These are all going to come back to you, I believe.
And Mr. Maxon too.
Mr.
Sorry.
Maxon, yes, I'm sorry. You're right.
Thank you.
Guys, did you both get the questions? Okay. This isn't a question and answer. This is question. We're going to answer them later. Okay. So make sure you have them all. Mr. Martin, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Martin, Precinct 7 Town Meeting Representative and Chair of the Bylaw Review Committee. Couple of questions. I believe Ms. Russo is asking the same one, but I'm not sure. I'd like to know what the ultimate build out, if AT&T is coming in here and asking us for, this is the first 5G tower that they want to put in, what is their ultimate build out to provide 5G service to the rest of the town so that we can see all of the 5G towers that they're going to do. The next question is, we just put that light in within the last 2 or 3 years, that lamppost. And if I remember rightly, it cost somewhere between $8,000 to $10,000. And who's going to reimburse us for that lamppost? Because it's going to come down. If we allow AT&T to put it in there, I'd like to be reimbursed for that expense. Maybe have them install it somewhere further down Mall Road, but then Verizon or T-Mobile or somebody else will come along and want to put their 5G tower, you know, post in, and we'll have to take it down again. So I want to know how we're going to get reimbursed for that. Since it sounds like the primary user of this 5G at the moment is the business complexes right there around Leahy, has been suggested. Why aren't we putting it on some other telephone pole someplace? Why aren't we putting it on top of the parking garage that's at Leahy, having AT&T rent that space so that maybe the people that are actually going to Leahy don't have to pay parking fees any longer. Support that parking garage. And it would be interesting to know, do we have any other applications coming in from all of the other carriers? Because if AT&T is the first one, the others carriers, mobile telephone carriers, are going to be coming in, and they're also going to be, if we put this pole, allow AT&T to put this one pole in, Verizon's going to want to put one, T-Mobile's going to want, or Sprint's going to want another one. Everybody else is going to want one. And how many poles are we going to have to replace all up and down Mall Road? and that we spent $10,000 on so that they can all put another pole up there. So that leads me to the final question. Can this pole that AT&T is putting up be used by other carriers, be rented by other carriers to also provide their 5G network off of that same pole? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're getting a couple of double questions here. So try, if you're going to speak on this, try to listen to what someone else is saying. If the question's already been asked, then just kind of let it go. And we're going to try to get those. We're not going to try. We're going to get the answers for everybody. Christine Warren, I believe you're next on my list here with hands up. Christine?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Selectman Chairman Morandi. Thank you very much. I don't think anyone has covered this, but I apologize if anyone has. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 4, and also a member of the Sidewalk Committee. And the town has long been plagued by telephone poles in the middle of sidewalks that prevent the access and egress for people in wheelchairs or people with baby carriages. And is there any opportunity to remove poles or other utility equipment that is no longer in use? Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, the next question would be Sally Willard. You're out there, Miss Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. The first one is rhetorical. Why do people in traffic need 5G? So, on to my next question. Who will charge?
I think you know what? I think I needed that.
you know, when one company comes in and has their 5G access to the people around, the people driving, my question is, who's going to charge the other 5G providers for the use of the pole? So AT&T has their antenna. Are we going to just allow anyone else to put their antenna internally to the pole? Someone's going to need to pay for all of these poles because and that brings me to another question. It's not just one pole. So who owns the poles? If the town owns the poles, then is the town going to charge each cell service or each company, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, for their access to that pole? And if we are, I think that's great, but I think that we also need to make sure that we have a plan for that. And are these brand new poles? In other words, we have a bunch of light poles out there, but are these new poles that are going to be interspersed, or are they simply replacements for existing poles? And then, how many other poles will be needed to cover the road? You know, you have one that's up near Leahy, but there's a lot of space from Cambridge Street down to Middlesex Turnpike. And if AT&T has permission to put up one pole, does that naturally mean that they can do poles all over town? Now, in my neighborhood, for a change, I have great coverage. I have 5G, but I think that must come from someplace over at MITRE. But once they put in one pole, does that mean they have blanket permission to put these 5G cells everywhere around town? And I think that's an important question for that we really need, everyone in town needs an answer to, because we certainly don't want to have to, at our expense, replace poles so that they all have the same 5G capability. Oh, and I think that's it. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Kelly? You have a question? Jack, you out there? You're on mute, Jack, if you are.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a regular attendee at the committee meetings that Selectman Tigas ran there a couple of years ago. As I recall, and I wonder if it's still part of the policy, they were not allowed to use equipment that was not acceptable to the U.S. military and the U.S. government. One of the ones was Huawei. I'm wondering if they have gotten around that. They have equipment in there that is acceptable to the U.S. government, the U.S. military, or they have excluded any equipment not acceptable to the U.S. government, the U.S. military. That's the extent of my question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Okay, Mr. Denizio, is there anybody else that I missed raising their hand that hasn't asked a question yet? There's no other ones out there?
Mr. Chairman, that's the last hand up, but there was a question in the chat that we can make sure it makes its way to the appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Ungerson, I saw your hand up. What would you like to speak on?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. Again, looking at our street photos, the town uses antennas on some of our street directory for emergency response vehicles and some other items along Middlesex Turnpike. The proximity of this small cell in relation to those antennas I'm talking about, will the small cell interfere with the operation of those other antennas that the town uses on the street lights, on the traffic directory lights?
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Can I just ask a point? Can I just ask a point of clarification so I can get an appropriate
Absolutely.
answer? What kind of antenna? I'm not sure. Could you just describe to me what the antennas are?
I believe the antennas are those used for emergency response vehicles to turn the street directory lights from to red so that the emergency vehicles can get through there. And I think there's another antenna for other purposes on the traffic directory light there, or may even be a camera. I just want to make sure that your operation is not going to interfere with any other town operation with these antennas mounted on the lights around the area.
Yep. No, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So at this point, seeing there's no other questions for anyone else, Mr. Pear and Mr. Maxon, you both have questions that came to you that need to be answered. So I'm going to look for a motion to move this to our next meeting. Will that give you one meeting, or do you want a couple of meetings out to answer? There was quite a few questions, so I'm just trying to give you the amount of time on both ends of it. Questions that would be asked.
When is your next meeting?
Nick, what did you say it was? The 20 what? Well, Betty, I should ask. 22nd. Things, and then we'll give you plenty of time to answer all these questions. There's a lot of them.
Oh no, we can answer. We can answer those before the 22nd.
Okay, Mr. Denizio, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just interrupt real quick, responding to that same question. I'm good for the same 2 weeks. It would be helpful to have the information from the applicant in time to be able to also comment on it at the next meeting.
Okay. Mr. Denizio?
My recommendation was going to be to move it to the next meeting, and then if we weren't ready, we could always continue it, but to just tee it up for the next meeting.
Okay. So at this point, I would take a motion from one of the board members to. Yes, sir.
What?
Yep.
I want. I'm not trying to delay us, believe me, but I received a list of questions from Betty on Friday.
Okay.
Do you want answers to? I think there are 25 of them. Some are going to be duplications. I'm not sure where those came from. Maybe it was the meeting, and maybe I addressed a lot of them. I assume you want those answered also.
Yes.
Sure,
Yes.
why not?
Yes. What I'd like to see.
Why not?
What I'd like to see is the questions answered and mailed back to the Board of Selectmen and Betty and the town administrator, so we can go over the questions prior to the meeting. And then if we could actually get them out there to the public. That's when Nick comes in.
I think I can do that.
Okay? All right, so now, without any further questions, I believe, if somebody wants to make a motion to move this to the next meeting.
I'll
Mr.
make a
Chairman,
motion, Mr. Chairman, that we continue this to the March 22nd meeting at what time? 7 o'clock, 7:15?
Have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on it again, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Morandi, yes. So the meeting is moved to the 22nd. Do we set a time?
At what time? At what time is that?
Well, that's what I was asking. Is it 7 or 7:15 or
7:30.
7:30? Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for attending, and thank you having the patience of sitting there waiting to get your questions asked, and hopefully we'll get them all answered before the next meeting. All right? Mr.
Thank you.
Denizio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't shoot the messenger, but we have another public hearing coming up next. So if we could have someone read that notice.
Jim, you awake?
Certainly am.
Hey, bud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Burlington Board of Selectmen hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 8th, 2021 at or after 6:40 p.m. to review for potential approval for changes to the Town of Burlington's Board of Selectmen's alcohol server policy, alcohol rules and regulations, and addenda, as well as potential adjustments to restaurant premises and/or location conditions. The plans and supporting documentation are available at the town's website at burlington.org, and the Burlington Board of Selectmen's public hearing notices are printed in the Burlington Daily Times Chronicle and may also be downloaded from the masspublicnotices.org.
Thank you, Mr. Tigas. Mr. Denizio, quick review of what we're about to go over from you, and then I'll take over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this item is a review of the alcohol policy and rules and regulations, and I believe you were going to take this one.
Yes, I was. Should I want me to open the public hearing first, or should I just go with it?
Yes, please open the public hearing.
Okay, so I need a motion to open public hearing. I
So
see
moved.
Bob and Jim there, so we're gonna go with the roll call vote. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Mr. Tigas,
Yes.
Mr. Priest,
Yes.
Miranda, yes. So this is something that myself and Bob have looked at, being with the alcohol subcommittee. Right now in Burlington, to have a full liquor license, you need 120 seat capacity. To have a beer and wine license, you need 40. Myself and Bob have talked about this. We did not come up with any type of numbers. We would like to change the rules on this. And it's my understanding, Mr. Denizio, that it's up to the Board of Selectmen to do this. Right? So there's reasoning behind it. We all talk about the center of town, and we talk about small restaurants coming in. We talk about family-owned and operated type of places. Well, to have a full liquor license in that area down there, you need 120 seats. No one's going to open a restaurant in that area with 120 seats. So this is just a discussion right now. I don't think it's going to be voted on tonight. I think we should personally knock it down to a totally different number. I'd like to get some other opinions on this. Mr. Hogan's on the subcommittee with me, so Bob, if you'd like to take over, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we actually, this has been going on probably longer than it should have, and we probably need to look at the fact that all we have are chains, chain restaurants, because of the 120 seat minimum for having a full license, when there's a lot of communities that have much smaller, if any, numbers at all. I know Betty and the staff in the office have gone through, and I'm assuming you've all looked at the list for other surrounding communities where they have much smaller numbers or no minimum at all. And it's, you know, and the selectmen take up the request and then make a determination based on that request, whether or not there's enough seats, whether it's 120 or 20. So I think we should have a conversation and maybe generate some interest in having some community restaurants that are smaller, mom and pop, we'll use the term because I think we all know what that means, but smaller mom and pop kind of restaurants that can afford to come in town and have a place where it's a good meal and a glass of wine or a hard liquor. So, I mean, that's where we're at. So we'll be interested to hear what the other members have to say about this. But when Joe and I have talked to people out in the community, I know that we've both gotten the same kind of response in support of making a change.
Thank
so I'll
you,
leave
Bob.
it at that.
Mr. Runyon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fully supportive of us taking a deeper dive into this. I know for a fact that you know, during our economic development committee discussions, there's some property owners in town have indicated that the requirements really restrict them in terms of recruiting potential tenants over there. So I think this is a great time to review our policy. Hasn't been modified for 30 years or so. But I would like to suggest, though, that we pull in the building department as well as planning in terms of definitions. They may have a different definition of what a full menu dining establishment is versus a bakery, for example. So I think they should be included in the discussion, but I fully support reviewing this and make some revisions to get the kind of folks that I think it's pretty evident that the people in Burlington want to see some more smaller type establishments in town, and by amending the policy would help make that vision come true. So with that, I'll leave it with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Priest.
Make sure I'm unmuted here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple questions. So I agree. I'm in support of this as an idea, start a thought. I think that any way we can help promote smaller business within the community is a step in the right direction. For example, is the Building 19 lot zoned for it's zoned for restaurant use, right?
Yes, it is.
And so if we ended this, they'd be able to put alcohol in there as well.
So if they want to put a restaurant on their neck and have a full alcohol license, they need a 120-seat restaurant. What the proposal does, I'm just going with a number. We got a guy who wants to open a small little Irish pub down there for 45 seats. Do we keep the number at 40? Do we keep it at 50? That's what the discussion is about. We're not going to vote on anything tonight. I'd like to put it on the agenda for the next meeting to actually vote on this.
Okay. Because I noticed in the backup, all the communities listed and what around us and what they're doing, and a lot of them have no restrictions whatsoever.
Right.
has there, in your research of this, has there been any, let's call them side effects, negative side effects to having no minimum?
Me personally, I haven't seen any at all. Some of the towns I've talked
Nick,
to, Winchester.
Mr. Chairman,
I've
if
talked to
Nick could
Winchester.
address that
I've talked to
question.
Bob, excuse me for a second. I've talked to Winchester, I've talked to Woburn. Tom Scappinger is in charge of liquor down there. I've talked to him. That's how they get all those small restaurants in Woburn Center, from Mezzo and Black and Orange and all the other ones. That's how they get in there with being so small, because they don't have a number down there. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Bob,
if I could. I was just going to say, if we could address that question to Betty, because she was involved in asking these questions, that she might have gotten some feedback from the people she talked to. So she might be able to give that answer to us at some point.
Thank you, Bob. Nick?
But for those
Yes.
people who are watching who don't have a copy of the list, Bill Ricca has no minimum. Chelmsford, Framingham, Linfield, Quincy, Waltham, Concord have no minimum seating at all. And the communities take it as, you know, and as is, that when the request comes, we take a look at it. And if we think somebody needs to have more than, say, 20 seats, and we say, well, no, that's not appropriate, you got to have at least 30 or 40, we make that decision then, or we can pick a number.
Okay. And then this is my last question. So, you know, we go out and say we go none. Where does the ABCC get involved in terms of, you know, like from when we say yes and vote the policy through to when, you know, it's approved by the state, like what's the time frame and all that?
Okay, we'll find that out. We'll go from there, find that out. We'll get all those answers together, and the next meeting we'll have those, or you'll have them before the next meeting, so we can actually do something with this. All right.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Thank you. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Nick, that was one of the questions I had is, does this have any ABCC implications or a need for state review? I know where it's policy, it doesn't have to go through review. I just keep hearing myself talk here. Right. Just too, if you go to around us and you look at the independent non-chain restaurants, they do have they were crowded before the pandemic hit, and those are the successful ones. And the residents tell us every day this is what they want. They want small mom and pop restaurants, you know, local non-chain restaurants. So I think this is a great way of getting us in the right direction, and I'm definitely in support of this. Again, the question is, what is the number, if any? But thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. The only one I'm going to go to right now, Andy, you're in the room right now, so there was some questions asked that you will be getting an email from Betty on, so just be ready for that. We want to find out, and I believe Kristen Kazan, you're still here. You'll be getting the same group of questions, I imagine, just to find out. Some of the selectmen had questions on it and want to bring you in on this, which I think is a great idea also. So we don't have a number, just to bring the staff in and find out what, you know, everyone come up with a number and whatever it's going to be, whether it's going to be 0 or it's going to be 40. I don't know. I have no idea. So let's go from there. Okay. Now,
Mr. Chairman, if I could also ask that we just bring the Board of Health in as well, too?
Sure. Ask the Board of Health, too.
All right, only because they'll have regulations for and the sanitary code with additional above food service for alcohol service as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Kristen has left the meeting. I just saw that, so apparently that's the staff. That's what I wanted to know. Let's go to the public, or anybody in the public that would like to comment on this, because it's a public hearing. Does anybody see a hand up that I'm missing? Just Andy covering his whole screen. Is that what everyone saw? Okay, seeing there being none, we'll just make a motion to move this. John, we'll move this to the next meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, continue to the next meeting.
Okay.
Roll
Need a
call.
motion? Motion from Mike, second from Bob, shaking his head over there. Jimmy?
Yeah.
We need a roll call vote, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan?
What is the time? But what is the time during the next meeting?
Oh,
We're already at
let's do it
past
early.
7:30.
I always miss the times, don't I? Let's do, I bet it is 6:30 available.
Well, we've already got two set up that night.
Why don't we do that first thing?
Okay.
Okay. 6:15?
6:15?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty. All right, now let's go to the vote. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. Okay. Okay, last one, I think. No, not really. But anyway, Mr. Denizio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a discussion on the health insurance for elected officials. In your backup, there was a detailed memo from Mr. Giannino, who's here to join us tonight, along with some historical and financial information. If you would like to recognize Mr. Giannino, he's here to answer any questions the board might have. I believe this is another item that's going to be over multiple nights where we talk about it tonight, solicit some feedback from other boards before a vote eventually taken at some point in the future.
So, Mr. Giannino, start us off with this. Give us a little history, a little rundown of numbers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The memo I had circulated was in your agenda book, really talks about the beginning in 1959 of the town meeting, or the town of Burlington, I should say, voting to accept Chapter 32B, Section 2. It relates to the benefit of health insurance to elected officials. In 1997, there was I also put in an explanation highlighted in yellow, which identified where they talked about the elected officials, regardless of the number of hours devoted, if the elected officials had to receive some sort of stipend. There were 29 elected officials in the town that received a stipend. There was that was a memo dated July 18, 1997. A letter dated May 29th, 1998. Town council responded to some questions. The town's responsible for 50% of health insurance. The town program precludes former employees from participating if they're not retirees in the system. And also, that memo noted Mass General Law 32B, Section 17, relating to individuals who involuntarily terminated. They could get benefits up to 39 weeks. David Owen, the town administrator in 98, also discussed the synopsis. It discussed the town meeting committee, which had been assigned to look into this benefit. The synopsis of the subcommittee at that point was of not having an issue of increasing stipends or increasing the number of town boards and officials receiving stipends, as long as not accompanied by health insurance. There was a range of articles that were put forth to eliminate the stipends, eliminate health benefits, seek a special act of the state legislature to do so. That those motions to rescind the health insurance, I provided you some information I received from Daniel McCormick, the town archivist, and those motions failed. I identified for you in the memo some proponents of the program and some of the reasons people thought spoke in favor of it back in 1998. Opponents of the program also had talked about the cost of the program and as a detriment, and that some of these elected officials work less than 20 hours. There was really no discussion about who worked harder than other, but as I said, there are, I think, 7 or 8 boards, I had that here earlier, that have received stipends. The current factors, health insurance is becoming a burden in many communities. A recent survey indicated 25% of the communities in Eastern Mass still offer health insurance to elected officials. Mass general law leaves that decision to the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board to make a determination. Presently, as of March 1st, there's 12 active elected officials and 3 retired officials on the health insurance. I attached the schedule identifying that. The cost to the town in total is about $214,000, $191 for active elected officials and $23,000 for retired. It represents about 1.5% of the health insurance cost in fiscal year 21. The budget is for health insurance is $14,472,000. Health insurance costs about 9.6% of the recurring expenditures in the town. And again, the cost was 14. I ended the memo with a couple of options the board could discuss. And I leave that to you as the Board of Selectmen to make that decision. I don't know if there's any questions. I'm happy to respond.
Those questions right now. So we'll start with Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I have any questions. I think that I feel like I'm probably in favor of the idea of reducing it in some manner. I don't know what that manner is. I think, generally speaking, I would prefer to see elected officials receive maybe a slightly higher stipend, and either no health insurance or a 50-50, offering, and should they so choose. I think we've all said this at one point or another. None of us got into this for the benefits. So if it means that we can save the town $214,000, and maybe we grandfather everyone, who's in for now, and then moving forward, we just no longer offer it. That way we're not, pulling the rug out, so to speak, under anybody. Yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts at this point. Just wanted to share. Thank you.
Mr. Runyon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, excuse me, there's been a thorny issue that comes up from time to time. We're facing a budget crisis, as you're all aware of. I've attempted to address this issue a couple times in the past without success. I think if ever there was a time to focus our attention on this, given the cost of the health insurance, I think that time is now. There is a provision in the law that any elected official that can document that they put in 20 hours a week on a regular basis would still be entitled to that benefit. I'm willing to grandfather the folks who are on the program, and I think that benefit, the time for that benefit is over. We need to seriously start focusing on ways to reduce our budget. I firmly believe, there's no doubt in my mind, that we can attract qualified candidates to seek elected office without the benefit of health insurance. So that's been my opinion for, for years, and that's my opinion today. I would urge the board to seriously consider eliminating this benefit, grandfathering those who are on the program. And again, there is a provision in the law for elected officials, such as the town clerk, who can document that they work 20 hours on a regular basis, will still be qualified. I'm comfortable with that, and that's my position.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I concur wholeheartedly with what Selectman Rennie just said. He took a lot of my thoughts. But if ever there was a time that this should be looked at, I think I agree. It's now, and I won't belittle it or belittle it anymore. So I'll stop right there in the essence of time.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan. You're on mute, Bob.
One of those difficult choices, Mr. Chairman. And I agree, just stopping it isn't fair. So I think we need to have a phase in or a phase out, whichever way you want to look at it, where we actually say anybody who's elected in the future, whether that means this election or the next one, the benefit won't be available, and that maybe at that time also we start the clock, a long clock, but a clock for the people who are on it, that they know that in 10 years or something, it'll start to phase out or something like that. But it's a generous benefit for some folks who are really part-time elected officials. Some folks do work very aggressively at their jobs, and that'll have, they'll hopefully still be reelected if we have this phase out or phase in thing for a while. So, but yeah, it has to be addressed. I think this is one of those things that's gone on for a long time, and maybe it's the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm not going to get into this right now as far as the discussion goes or comments from myself, because I am one of the ones on that list, as everybody knows. I have nothing to hide about that. I do take the insurance, and I do pay my own premium for that. Mr. Denizio, what I'd like to do is take and ask Betty or yourself or Paul, if he ever comes back from vacation, to reach out to the other boards and just get some feedback from the other boards, because we know why he took tonight off. But we're going to leave that alone. Anyway, that's what I would like to do. So this is open for discussion between us. It's not a public hearing. So I just want to get your ideas on this. John, you're all set with asking Paul when he comes back, and Betty, could you find out how the other boards, send them an email, the other boards on this? Gary, any other comments? Gary, Mr. Giannino, excuse me.
No, sir. Paul and John had asked me to do a little background on it, and hence the 5-page document you have.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to get some questions, we're going to get some feedback from you guys, questions and answers on this. And do we grandfather people in? Do we shut it off completely? Do we figure out another way to go about this? And when the vote comes up, we'll figure it out. All right, boys? All right, thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Denizio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last item has been postponed till the next meeting. So
Hercules. Wonderful. Means we're almost done. All right, so that's been postponed. That's moved out. Let's go with subcommittee reports first. Let's go with Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of a long meeting, I'll keep this as brief as humanly possible.
Okay, let's move on then.
I really don't have much to say. So Just quickly, obviously, tonight we learned that we want to establish a transportation subcommittee. So I'll come back to the board at the next meeting after talking with Selectman Runyon. We can start to propose, what that might look like. Selectman Tigas and I still need to sit down and discuss the diversity equity committee and what that might be going to look like. We've had several conversations with various groups around the community, and we want to start to solidify that. ISAC is still working to establish their charter, so they're working forward on that, and I'm hopefully going to get back into the fray with them on the social media policy. Sculpture Park Committee has developed a series of postcards in an effort to help raise funds for the Sculpture Park itself. And knowing that we don't know exactly what we're going to do with that in the future, they've been making great headway, in terms of getting the visibility of the park up and out there for the community and for the surrounding region. And then lastly, we just learned today from Melissa Tentaklis, our economic development director, that we, the community, secured $85,000 site readiness grant through MassWorks, I think it was. But in any case, just as we talk about budget reductions and revenue loss in this continued pandemic that is just kind of perpetually invading our lives, and trying to maintain foothold and maintain Burlington as a place where people want to come and thrive, both for residents and businesses. That our economic development committee and Melissa as our director are working nonstop to make that happen. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Conversation today with Police Chief Mike Kent, reminding people, lock your cars at night when you get out and go into your house. We've had an awful lot of break-ins recently. People aren't, and they're not breaking into the car, they're just opening the door because people aren't locking the doors. All kinds of things are being taken or stolen or whatever. So they have no suspects at the moment. So his response to everybody is lock your door, please. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little out of the ordinary for a subcommittee report, but it's what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an email that was sent to the fire chief regarding a call for service that the fire department took. It reads as follows. Dear Fire Chief Mike Patterson, I would like to offer my deepest thanks and gratitude to your entire staff as it relates to my 911 call on the evening of February 19th. After having been transported via EMTs and Burlington Fire to Leahy, I was in cardiac arrest and flatlined with fatal arrhythmias twice in the ER. The entire team that came to my home includes Tom Monagle and Connor McLean, who was right by my side in the ambulance doing his best to keep me comfortable. Also on the engine were Lieutenant Mike Fontenay, Stephen White, and Michael Morgan. The dispatcher who took our call was Patrick O'Halloran. This entire team displayed professionalism, knowledge, compassion, and most importantly, truly a love for their job. My experience was world class and makes me proud to be a resident of Burlington. I commend your entire team and can't thank you, your people, and your institution enough for saving my life and doing it caringly and compassionately. May you continue to serve the people of Burlington by providing superior responsiveness and care, leading to the best possible outcome for every ill person. I think that is a testament to our fire department, to our town, and I mean, that's probably one of the most nicest subcommittee reports I could read this year. So I'll leave it at that. That was a resident's response to the fire department saving his life.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Runyon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, again, Nick mentioned Melissa in our economic development department. I mean, she's just been wonderful. She's couldn't have come to us at a better time. She's secured millions of dollars for us in the past year in grants and so forth. She's just been wonderful. And I will defer to you, Mr. Chairman, on the DPW side. I know you're going to talk about the upcoming irrigation season and water issues that we have. So that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so now Chairman's report. We're going to just real quick. Yeah, there's a water ban still on right now. We never took it off. So, but we've had some issues with residents in watering from last summer. We got some requests for to reduce their bills because they do not have a second meter on their house. I hate to say it, but we deny those. It's not up to us to put the second meter on, but we're trying to come up with an idea. With your water bill, you'll get a notice that you are able to put a second meter on at your cost, not up to the town to cost it. And that takes away from, half your water bill. I have one that works out great. Second thing I'm trying to work with is with the new construction that goes on in Burlington right now, all these new houses, and everyone's doing a million things in their yard right now. A lot of people have put sprinkler systems in. I want to find out if we can make it some type of a mandate that if you tear down a house here in town, builder comes in, tears down a house, every single one of them has a sprinkler system. So can we as a town ask, you have to put a second meter in for the sprinkler system with a rain guard on it. The rain guard stops it from working while it's raining out. I have one, it works fantastic. And it would reduce the cost of the water being used in town. It would also save some people some money, and eventually they could all work out really good for us. So those are a couple of questions I have. It's not easy to sit there, as Mike and I did the other day, and have to tell someone, I'm sorry, you don't have a second meter. You're paying a surge charge on the water that's going back in the ground. That's just the way it works. I'm sorry, but that's how it works. So we're trying to work on this for the residents. Mike, if I missed anything, I didn't. Okay, just making sure. I got it all written down here. I thought it was all right. But so that's my subcommittee report tonight for the water. It's coming. I'm telling you, Burlington, it's coming. We're all waiting for the MWRA. I am waiting just as much as everyone else is. Trust me on that one. We're going to go to the town administrator's report. So I have my phone here. I'm going to call Paul down in Florida and see if he has anything for us to say. He's probably busy right now, maybe an attitude adjustment, adult beverage. So, Mr. Denizio, what do you have for us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we buried the lead on this one a little bit, but as you've all probably heard by now, the announcement made by Chief Kent today that he's going to be moving on to the next part of his career coming up at the end of the fiscal year here. It's a big loss for us. I look forward to when I see Paul, him saying he went away for a week and I lost the best department head we've ever had. But I'll deal with that. So we have plenty of time to shower the chief with accolades over the next few months. But we just wanted to give you notice that he did make that announcement today. And Paul will come to the next meeting with a plan on succession plan there. So more to come on that.
Very long succession plan, right?
Okay. So with that note, I see couple people out here. Citizens time. One shaking their head, and at that point, I'm going to need a motion to. Everyone shaking their head. Do. I need a motion to adjourn.
How are you doing, sir?
Mike, second by Nick. I'm going to call it out in roll call. Mr. Hogan.
Yes.
Mr. Runyon.
Yes.
Mr. Tigas.
Yes.
Mr. Priest.
Yes.
Mr. Randy. Yes. Meeting adjourned, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.